We were rushing to get the website migrated from one format to another, and we had a deadline to do it, and basically pulled loads of overtime, worked really, really hard. And during this, a woman kept repeatedly coming up to me and asking me what was essentially the same question, over and over. And effectively, by the end of it, I had become quite dismissive and been like, look, I don't have time to talk to you, you'll have to ask someone else, or just, you'll have to try and remember what you were told the last 3 times you asked. I got disciplined for that, because that was apparently making her feel dismissed, which came under the umbrella term of harassment. Telling someone to go away because I was busy was harassment. So I can quite well believe Kim Elsa, the author who argues that a sex partition has sprung up, which impedes women from building the vital network of contacts in the company where they work, as well as outside of it. Because you can be goddamn sure I didn't go to lunch with that woman or anything like that. I kept my distance, because the last thing I want to do is harass someone. But again, this kind of creates a pro-stoicism argument. It isn't what people are doing. So if they change their mind at some point in their life, they at least haven't wasted the gift of sight, but instead managed to find another human being to help blind them by pouring drain cleaner in their eyes. I mean, you would probably be despairing at humanity. Now, I can't believe it's legal for this psychologist to help someone permanently blind themselves. I really can't. But apparently it must be, because they haven't been to jail or anything as far as I'm aware. So just fuck this planet. Just fuck it. And finally this week, the thing that pisses me off the most, the Huffington Post publishes names and photos of people who oppose migrant invasion on social media. This is from the Huffington Post Germany, and I am staggered and disgusted that anyone at the Huffington Post would think this kind of attempted public shaming is acceptable. The Huffington Post Germany is posting people's names and photos who comment on social media opposing the migrant invasion. If you post a comment on their site or Facebook or any social media, you will be named. The Huffington Post is a global news organisation. This is putting a target on anyone's head who refuses to go along with the leftist/Islamic war on freedom. Now, while I don't agree with the right-wing rhetoric and the
months ago. And the more I've spoken about feminism, the more I have realized, why has the word become such an uncomfortable one?
Hello and welcome to the 6th instalment of Why Do People Hate Feminism? A series where I try to explain to feminists exactly why everybody hates it, because they don't seem to have any idea. And in doing so, try to explain some of the tenets of feminism for normal people to understand. In this episode, we will be dealing with sexism and how everything can be declared sexist and therefore problematic to the feminist mind. But don't take my word for it. Let's take the word of a world-renowned, insanely popular feminist.
Because like when you start learning about systems, everything is sexist, everything is racist, everything is homophobic, and you have to point it all out.
Everything is sexist, everything's offensive to people like me. Let's go through the checklist.
No, you're childish. Child. Why is Guido inviting me to an arm wrestling thing? He sent me the same thing. Hey, just reject them.
Hey,
I've never done an arm wrestling.
Alright, I'm gonna remove passive.
That whatever the subject is sexist. Because, as Anita says, there is nothing that isn't sexist. So let's try to understand what we're dealing with when a feminist declares something to be sexist. So, the first place to start would obviously be the dictionary. The dictionary being a completely legitimate source of feminist definitions. I mean, hell, Gloria Steinem herself defines feminism using the dictionary.
What is the definition of feminism?
Those does not
Grace,
surprise
I don't
me.
want to be disappointing, but it's the dictionary. I mean, actually, if you just go, you see that it's the belief in the full social, economic,
Oh, well.
political equality
But
of
still,
males and
Redskins
females.
suck.
So with that mandate, Merriam-Webster defined sexism as prejudice or discrimination based on sex. Behavior, conditions, or
It's all about
attitudes that
Eli
foster
Manning and the Giants.
stereotypes of social roles based on sex. So this is a
These
really
nuts.
broad definition. Prejudice or discrimination based on sex. I
Yeah.
discriminate based on sex all the time.
You want to see a dead
Heterosexuality
body?
is discrimination based on sex, as is
Tony Romo.
homosexuality. In fact, it seems that this is a definition so broad as to be almost useless.
Dead body.
So I decided to consult Social Justice Wiki in order to corroborate this definition. And it turns out that this is a
Nope.
perfectly adequate
No.
definition of sexism. Sexism is an umbrella term for discrimination based on gender at
Don't shoot me.
levels of advancement, e.g. both individual acts and systems. Okay, well that kind of makes it look like everything is actually sexist. Without having any understanding of systems, it seems that anything that has the potential
Strafe
to
fire.
differentiate between male and
Oh
female
no!
is sexist. But the thing is, as a man, I might not even be able to really understand what sexism is, despite the fact that sexism isn't actually a gendered term,
No!
not according to the dictionary.
Oh, too close.
So, as a word, as a concept, sexism did not exist before the 1960s, when it was made up by women of the American New Left, who appropriated the terminology of black power and applied it to the women's liberation movement. Men may not know this history, but most instinctively understand that sexism is a feminist preserve, policed by Puritans. They therefore uneasily leave it to their women to lay down the law on the subject. Is that sexist? If you say so, darling. This is, of course, a deeply sexist sentiment, one that discriminates exclusively between men and women. There's simply no other way of looking at it. The article ends with, if any man could draw up a comprehensive, infallible guide to navigating this treacherous territory, we would certainly erect a statue to his everlasting memory. Well, I can help you. As we've already discussed, it's everything. Anything that could potentially discriminate between male and female is sexist. If this post on Gorka Property Kinja is anything to judge by, and given the popularity of this post, I'm going to guess that it is. To say that not everything is racist, sexist, or homophobic is a phrase that should never come out of your mouth except to criticize it. This is also the opinion of writers at feminist frequency partner Bitch Media, who just state outright, no, everything you do is sexist. If I had to guess, I would say it's probably something to do with misogyny.
I think, frankly, misogyny is the air that we breathe.
Jesus, did you hear that matronly tone? And look at this judgy expression. Let's hear it again because I think she's serious.
I think, frankly, misogyny is the air that we breathe.
Mr.
You might think
Crest
that's quite a
said
radical
we
point of
should
view to
talk
have, but
about
it's actually
work.
quite mainstream, espousing this as a position. Like Taylor
Is there a
Swift.
room in the back or something?
Misogyny is ingrained from birth.
Cool, I'll get
She
set
thinks
up.
that women's achievements are recognized differently from men's. A man writing about his feelings from a vulnerable place is brave. A woman writing about her
So,
feelings
Mr.
from a
Crest
vulnerable
said you
place
might be able to help me
is
out with something.
oversharing or
Well, not
whining.
me, so that's clear.
And
It's not me you're going to be
misogyny is
helping.
ingrained in people
And I want
from
it
the time
understood
they are
that I am
born.
not
So to me,
involved.
feminism
Just
is
a
probably the most
bystander
important
doing a
movement that you can
favor.
embrace.
And this is not an
Because
offer of
basically
employment so
just
much
another
as
word
an
for equality.
opportunity. And,
I
well,
suppose she'd
anyway,
know better
let's
than
just
me.
get
I
a
haven't
bit
had any
technical,
wins
but the
at
point
Billboard.
is,
I haven't been on
sometimes our
Maxim
fair and
magazine
legal
or Glamour
justice
magazine
system
up and down in a way that made her feel as though she wasn't dressed sexily enough. This is a perfect example of a blick in action. There are myriad interpretations of a look, and only the looker can confirm if they're accurate. If one extracts all the conjecture and simply reads the reported dialogue, it appears that the entire exchange lasted no more than a minute. The doorman says Louisa is not dressed smartly. She maintains she is. He refuses to budge. She turns on her not high heels. Having labelled this as a sexist incident, some further communication could have confirmed whether indeed this was about gender, or whether it was snobbery, or missing a memo about what constitutes a smart dress code. If it transpires that all of Louisa's assumptions are correct, then I will be suitably outraged. It's obviously unacceptable for entry to an establishment to be granted or refused according to how much the doorman wants to have sex with potential clientele. But I don't have enough information to make an informed judgment. She goes on to say, if I were a man reading the account, I can imagine thinking, hang on, I'm expected to care about important issues, to which some feminist factions would counter, but it's symptomatic of the underlying misogyny pervading our society, their collective blick. To which the response would be, not all men, and so the whacking great chasm of misunderstanding between the sexes would spiral ad infinitum. This very sane and rational critique about feminists declaring everything to be sexist is lost on the majority of feminists. However, there is a minority of feminists that are waking up to the issue. Such as this article, feminists need to stop sounding false alarms about sexism. This is referring to when Mark Zuckerberg said, I'd feel like I was not doing my job if I spent any of my energy on things that are silly or frivolous about my life, referring to the fact that he wears grey t-shirts all the time, despite the fact that he wasn't talking about women in any way with that statement. Some idiot still managed to interpret this as a sexist statement. But don't make the mistake of thinking that what these people are doing isn't in any way feminist. It absolutely is. Now, feminism is not a monolith, nor should it be. Just as feminism showed us that there are many kinds of women and men in society, there must also be many kinds of feminism. This multiplicity is essential to progress, for the contours of feminism are defined by the battles between various factions. Feminists have to not just hold society accountable, but hold each other accountable, to keep mainstream feminism from losing its edge. But there is also the risk of feminist overreach, which is exactly what we're seeing here. Now, I found this article through a website called Sociology Job Market Rumors, where I said that I sometimes do a double take, not because I'm transphobic, but I was just surprised. All of the time that this happened, I leave them alone. I do a quick 2 seconds look, almost reflexively, just to make sure that it is not me that entered the wrong bathroom. I was accused of being transphobic. I clarified that I do not really care who is using the bathroom, as long as I am not using the wrong one. But she insisted that the very fact that I took a 2-second glance at that person makes me a bigot. I give up. I neither refuse, confront, nor feel uncomfortable with sharing bathrooms with gender non-conforming people. Despite that, I'm transphobic. I'm at a loss for words. To which someone directly replied, don't you know that transphobia, like sexism and racism, is unconscious? It doesn't matter what you consciously think or feel. And I really think that this hits on an important point. Declaring everything to be sexist is not giving anything the benefit of the doubt. It's assuming the motivation of everything, and even when the motivation is from a feminist who simply wants to make sure that she is in the right bathroom.
So,
This is
you're moving
declared
on
to
the
be
plane. It's at
sexist,
McKenzie Airfield.
even though
Logistics
there may
are
well
as
be
yet
no
undecided.
sexist motivation,
Go on
and
how you like,
to simply
but go in with
task
a good
a
supply of ammunition,
well,
armor, and
you
maybe
were just
even
unconsciously
explosives.
sexist.
It's gonna
You
get
can't
kinda
help
heavy.
but
Like
be
I said before, the
sexist.
airfield is under
So
Vago's
it's not
control.
only
They're
not
using the
right,
plane to make
but it's
trafficking
not
runs
even
across
right.
the border.
It
That
can't
means
be
it's
shown
already
that
set up to
there
take
is a point
Rishkovsky out
at any
of country.
time
Limited
that one is
radar
not
visibility,
sexist.
plausible cover
It is
story.
essentially
Perfect. Don't let the
unscientific,
fact there are a bunch of
but
angry
it's
drug
also
dealers
just
waiting for
assuming
you
the
effectively
worst
to go
about
in,
it.
or actually do.
Unrealistic. Essentially, what feminism needs to determine whether something is actually sexist is an aphorism like Hamlin's razor. Never attributes to malice that which is adequately explained by stupidity. In the case of feminism, it would probably go something like, never attributes to sexism that which can adequately be explained by
Okay, globalized, multinational, decentralized criminal network. Their principal interest is in drug trafficking, but they diversify into mid-level distribution, end-user sales, and trafficking other contraband. You get caught with a kilo of coke, they throw the book at you. You're caught with a quart of Captain Mara semen, it's a slap on the wrist. And the market for large endangered rodent ejaculate is lucrative. Most of the Vago's upper management is shot callers, if you like, are already incarcerated here in the States and throughout Central and Latin America. They run the network on cell phones, and it's a relatively flat hierarchy at the top. So if you got one
I was appointed as Goodwill Ambassador for UN Women 6 months ago. And the more I've spoken about feminism, the more I have realized that fighting for women's rights has too often become synonymous with manhood. My recent research has shown me that feminism has become an unpopular word. Why has the word become such an uncomfortable?
You know what, feminists, I feel inclined to help you. I want you to understand just why people hate feminism. And feminists, you have to understand that this is a big topic. There are so many things that feminists do that are, I don't know how you describe it, as anti-egalitarian, kind of supremacist, if you will, then I think this is probably going to turn into a series of videos. Let's start with the brazen and very open man-hate that you have addressed yourself in. Now, I'm going to start with an advert from Pantene, where they're pandering to women.
Sorry, can I ask a stupid question? Sorry, do you have a minute?
Okay, I'm bringing you close to the airfield.
Sorry.
Remember, once you engage these bastards, there's only one way this is going. Make a plan and execute it. No matter how good the plan is, expect sustained resistance. Maintaining the integrity of the plane is the priority here. Don't rush this.
Sorry, you go first.
I was gonna say.
Yes, this is the epitome of first world problems, but let's recap what's going on in each scenario. Woman interrupts man talk. Absolutely every reason to apologise. A man would apologise to a man for interrupting his speech to ask a question. Woman interrupting someone unseen in their office. Again, every reason for this person to apologise for interrupting. Woman's elbow resting on the arm of the next chair, so when the guy sits down, he is touching her and she apologises. Completely normal. Again, not a gender-based thing at all. Anyone should apologise for having done this. Mother apologises to father for interrupting him by forcing him to take their child so she can do something else. It's a completely normal interaction. And she's just being polite. There's nothing wrong with this at all. And women in a boardroom who are not giving the person trying to sit down enough space, so they apologise. Sorry, I wasn't letting you sit down because I was taking up too much room. Woman apologising to boyfriend because he has too much in the cupboard, and she's waking him up when she's trying to take some. Possibly the only thing in these examples she shouldn't actually apologise for out of politeness. Two people start talking at the same time and the woman apologises for talking at the same time as the man. Again, there's no reason that you wouldn't do that. He is in fact being impolite for not apologising as well. So what's Panten's suggestion?
I have a question. Why don't we go back to the original thing that we did?
Morning. Got a minute?
Sorry, not sorry.
Sorry, not sorry.
Panten's suggestion is for women to be passive-aggressive bitches. I wouldn't accept that kind of behaviour from a man, so why the hell would I accept it from a woman? And you'll notice in these clips women are exclusively doing this to men. But you might be thinking, well, this is just inconsiderate. What is the problem? It's really not that bad. No, it's not. These examples are not that bad. But let's have a look at Sarah Silverman's advert from the 2015 Super Bowl.
Sarah, this Wi-Fi calling from T-Mobile is the best. Yeah, I can talk from anywhere in my mansion. I already have it. Sound great in my
I think that's all the Vagos have got. In a few weeks, we'll leak this to a sympathetic reporter, and they'll get fingered for the breakout. Now clear the area and clear up any stray traffickers you encounter.
Delivery room. Sorry, it's a boy.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, sums up modern feminism. Sorry, it's a boy. 100 years ago, this advert would have been, sorry, it's a nigger. Now, everyone who isn't a feminist is probably thinking, wow, I can understand why so many people were pissed off with this advert. But feminists not only wouldn't hear of it, they would go as far as to defend this advert. Sorry, dude bros, Silver Sirman's sorry, it's a boy Super Bowl ad isn't sexist. Males, quote unquote, are happy to call misandry while totally overlooking what hashtag everyday sexism really looks like. It's this kind of absolute contempt for men is the reason why people think that feminists hate men. This is the sort of contempt you would expect white nationalists to have for black people. this complete disregard of a legitimate criticism, which the writer handles in the stupidest way possible. They claim that this isn't everyday sexism, because the actual reality of everyday sexism, from treating threats to release women's private information as a hoax, to actually releasing women's private photos, to telling women to smile on the street but never calling it harassment, to banning women's bodies on social media, all the way to paying them less for the same work. These are ridiculous justifications for this kind of prejudice being so blithely thrown around. We compare this to what they claim is institutionalized oppression and misogyny. So if we're going to examine this, the quickest one to pick apart is paying them less for the same work.
Either come back to the city or take in the natural beauty at a
I can
Vista
talk
Point.
from anywhere in my mansion.
You don't see the irony of this, Salon, at all, do you? Okay, what? Banning women's bodies on social media. Because Instagram banned pubic hairs, but then retracted their position. This is justification for prejudice against men by a woman who lives in a mansion, is it? Okay, well how about telling women to smile on the street? This is just a link to Salon's tag of street harassment. The first story taking place in Afghanistan of all places, the second story being of a man who got stabbed, and the third one is a woman apologising for lying to people. Needless to say, none of this is justification for prejudice against men. And lastly, apparently threatening to release women's private information to actually releasing the information. As awful as it is when a woman's ex-boyfriends or random strangers on the internet threaten to leak nude pictures of those women, it simply does not equate to institutionalized oppression. So not only will feminists defend man-hatred when they see it, but vast amounts of feminist art and literature seem to revolve exclusively around the concept of man-hatred. Take, for example, the Scum Manifesto, which is a radical feminist manifesto by Valerie Solanas that argues that men have ruined the world and it's up to women to fix it. And to achieve this goal, it suggests the formation of Scum, an organisation dedicated to overthrow society and eliminating the male sex. It's widely believed that Scum is an acronym that stands for the Society for Cutting Up Men. And she had held a series of recruitment meetings that she then later denied. Possibly when this came out and everyone was like, are you fucking kidding me? The Scum Manifesto is surprisingly popular amongst feminists.
Have fun.
I dedicate this play to me. A continuous source of strength and guidance, and without whose unflinching loyalty and devotion and faith, this play would never have been written. I dedicate this play to myself for proofreading, editorial comment, helpful hints, criticism, suggestions, and an exquisite job of typing. Finally, I dedicate this play to I, for independent research into men, married women, and other degenerates. Presentation of the rationale and program of action of Scum, Society for Cutting Up Men.
And I'll put a few pictures up while I talk here, because to give a few examples, it's a real thing, and it's worrying me because Tumblr is a huge community, and if so many people have this mindset, that's a bit worrisome. It's terrible. It's terrifying. I think it mainly started because of the Elliot Rodger thing, although it's been going on before that. But I think that triggered it even more because I've been seeing it a lot more recently ever since that happened. Feminists, like Tumblr feminists, real feminists are okay. I mean, I've had teachers who are feminists, and thank you for fighting for us. I love you. But Tumblr feminists seem to have this, still a little knowledge of the actual topic, and they take every incident that happens and they try to twist it into, an issue for feminism. And as you can see, I'm a woman, and see, I would fight for my rights, but it's gotten to the point when we're oppressing men to do it, and I don't believe that's right, because what's the point of that? Fighting for equality by oppressing men? That's not going to work.
This is, of course, just a bunch of Tumblr feminists. I mean, it's not like someone with real power would treat men's lives with contempt, is it? Well, a speech in which she unironically went viral. It's unsurprising that people thought that this was written by an actual feminist. After all, why wouldn't they think that? From what people have seen from feminists, why would they think that this wasn't real? Feminists went crazy, desperately trying to justify just how very, very obviously fake this was, even though to the average person, this is exactly what they would come to expect from feminism. There was nothing about this story that was incongruous from people's experiences of modern day feminism, and so feminists were falling over themselves to show just how this wasn't true. At no point did I see any of them turning around and asking themselves, why does everyone think this is true? So when Emma Watson is standing before the UN, pondering,
and the more I've spoken about feminism, the more I have realized that fighting for women's rights has too often become synonymous with man-hate.
my response is, well, it's because feminists seem to hate men. And when they're called on it, they will go as far as to redefine words for their own convenience. This picture comes from a gender studies textbook, redefining the definition of sexism to include power. And they have used this as rationale to say, well, if we can't be sexist towards men, then we can literally say anything we want towards men. We can be as quote-unquote ironically misandrist as we like, because apparently women do not hold institutional power, as if that matters in interpersonal interactions, and they do it to ameliorate the guilt of being vile human beings.
I was appointed as Goodwill Ambassador to UN Women in 6 months ago. And the more I've spoken about feminism, the more I have realized that fighting for women's rights has too often become with man-hate. And my recent research has shown me that feminism has become an unpopular word. Why has the word become such an unpopular word?
Welcome to part 2 of Why Does Everyone Hate Feminism? As we saw in part 1, the first reason that people hate feminism is that feminists hate men. And they hate men because of something they call the patriarchy. Of course, before we can go any further, we need to define our terms. What is a patriarchy? Now, any normal person would probably go and look for the standard English definition. So when a feminist says to the uninitiated that we live in a patriarchy, they're thinking that a patriarchy is a form of social organisation in which the father is the supreme authority in the family, clan, tribe, and descent is reckoned in the male line, with the children belonging to the father's clan or tribe. And by the second definition, this produces a society, community, or country based on this social organisation. This is going to sound quite intuitive to anyone who lives in the Western world, and they'll probably take to Google to see if they can find any kind of evidence to corroborate the feminist assertion that we live in a patriarchy. The first thing that they're going to discover is that marriage rates are sharply on the decline. Young people are simply not getting married. The next thing they'll discover is that over a quarter of families are single-parent households, and the overwhelming majority of these households, over 2/3 of them, will be led by single mothers. They'll probably also discover that women control approximately 20% of the US government, with 20% of the seats in Congress, the Senate, and the House of Representatives. And they'll find that in the world of business, the number of Fortune 500 companies that have women CEOs is higher than it's ever been. Admittedly, 24 female CEOs making up 4.8% of the overall total isn't a massive amount, but it really makes the point that there are no institutional barriers to prevent women from arriving at the top spot in a company. In fact, in the business and financial worlds, it's been widely known that women control the money in the United States, holding 60% of all personal wealth and 51% of all stocks, with over 1.3 million women earning over $100,000 plus annually, and running 40% of all private American businesses. But in addition,
say that basically, yeah, everything kind of can be blamed on the patriarchy.
Okay, so patriarchy seems to have a subjective definition for each feminist who is using it, and it seems to be omnipresent. Everything in society can be blamed on the quote-unquote patriarchy. In fact, it rather sounds like feminists are talking about society itself.
So for those of you who live under a rock, the patriarchy is essentially this idea that men have the power in society. And feminists essentially want to eradicate that and make everybody equal.
Okay, this is more specific, even if it does raise more questions. But at least we can be sure that we're not talking about any known dictionary definition of patriarchy. So at this point, we are 6.5 minutes into this video, and we are still not really sure what feminists are talking about when they're talking about patriarchy. And that is honestly because feminists aren't sure what they're talking about when they're talking about patriarchy. Dear feminists, can you see why people are getting pissed off with your ideology? So the most direct description of patriarchy I found was on everydayfeminism.com, where they say, although most of us know what a patriarchy is, a system of domination by the wealthy white male ruling class that has authority over everyone else, few of us understand how it plays out in our everyday lives. This definition is wonderfully concise and tells us absolutely everything we need to know about the feminist perception of the patriarchy, or at least this feminist's perception of the patriarchy. This definition has a decidedly Marxist slant. The wealthy white males are now considered a ruling class that has authority over everyone else. But as we've already seen, this definition completely ignores women who command political and economic power, of which there is no small number. So finally, let's try Wikipedia. Maybe they have some kind of definition of patriarchy that we can use. A definition that actually reflects reality. So the Wikipedia article sums up feminist theory as defining patriarchy as an unjust social system that enforces gender roles and is oppressive to both men and women. This isn't really that much help either, apart from the enforcing of gender roles, which, okay, that is a distinct and concrete thing we can cling to. Saying that it is oppressive to both men and women, it introduces another nebulous term which is probably not accurate and we'll never hear the feminist definition of. The article does at least have the grace to say, in feminist theory, the concept of patriarchy is fluid and loosely defined. So returning to our everyday feminism article, which is the one that has the most precise definition of patriarchy that we've had so far, they say that you may think of patriarchy as something that existed a long time ago in the United States. During the days of the Puritans, when women were the property of their husbands, were being accused of witchcraft and hanged. Well, I'm no expert, but that sounds a lot more like a patriarchy to me, instead of a civilization where women have the freedom to become CEOs and politicians. But apparently patriarchy still exists, and like racism, it often manifests in casual ways that tend to go unnoticed by the majority of people. Which is a bizarre statement to make in itself. How could a patriarchy be subtle? It enforces gender roles, it ensures domination of women by men. Not just how, but why would it operate and manifest in casual ways that tend to go unnoticed? But this I find to be the most revealing statement. And women aren't the only ones who suffer under patriarchy. Everyone does, because patriarchy demands that those in power conform to a specific set of rules, ones that require the suppression of feelings and include a lack of empathy. They go on to say that patriarchy demands that those being ruled play by a certain set of rules as well. They are the control ones. While they are allowed to show emotion, they cannot step outside of their prescribed boxes. They are not allowed to act assertive or attempt to gain authority. And as we've seen, that simply doesn't apply to women, so this seems to be complete nonsense. Since patriarchy has such fluid definitions, we'll just explore another one quickly. This one says that the patriarchy is a socio-political and cultural system that values masculinity over femininity. Now, that is an interesting statement, and we'll return to it in a minute. So, what have we actually learned about patriarchy? We know that it's got nothing to do with the common English definition of the word. We know that feminists are unable to accurately and consistently define the patriarchy. Nevertheless, they think the patriarchy is pervasive and omnipresent. They also think they know what the patriarchy wants. We know that the patriarchy is not preventing women from attaining money, power, or status. And despite this, rich and powerful women are affected by the patriarchy. The patriarchy is content to affect women in ways varying from very severe to utterly trivial. And the patriarchy is very concerned with gender roles. The patriarchy appears to be concerned with class conflict, primarily between the bourgeois male and the proletariat female. And the patriarchy is a system designed to benefit and privilege masculinity above femininity. And as such, the patriarchy oppresses women. But for some reason, the patriarchy also oppresses men. And finally, the patriarchy can be blamed for everything. Just looking at this list of absurd, mutually contradictory statements makes it very clear as to why the patriarchy is a joke amongst non-feminists.
Yeah, let's take a shot, man. Harder, man. You're not toe patriarchy at all.
Anyway, modern feminism has discovered that we are now beyond patriarchy. We are, in fact, fighting something called the kyriarchy. So apparently, if you're familiar with feminism, you'll have heard of the term patriarchy. Of course you will. The social order that privileges men and oppresses women, while also oppressing men. It's a useful term as it gives a name to the institutionalization of male privilege. And again, we'll come to this in a minute. Because feminism has moved on from being purely concerned with male privilege. We're about to learn about intersectional feminism. We now, thankfully and rightfully, take into account the number of different privileges and oppressions that people experience. Intersectional feminism is concerned with the social order that privileges and oppresses people based on race, gender, language, class, sexual orientation, disability, culture, and so on. Intersectional feminism tells us that oppression comes in many different forms. Someone is not simply oppressed or privileged. We can be simultaneously privileged and oppressed by different aspects of our identities. For example, someone can be privileged by the fact that they're cisgender, and white, while being oppressed by the fact that they're queer, disabled, or female. I don't mean to laugh, but they are putting the fact that someone's homosexual and female in the same category as being disabled. Anyway, because of all this, we need a word to describe the complex social order that keeps these intersecting oppressions in place. This has become necessary for feminist thinkers because, for example, the theoretical adequacy of patriarchy has been challenged because, for instance, Black men do not have control over white women. Don't they? God damn, I have waited a long time for an opportunity to use this image. Anyway, Kiriarchy acknowledges that gender-based oppression is not the only type of oppression that exists. And unlike the term patriarchy, which only refers to institutionalized sexism, Kiriarchy covers all forms of inequality. To achieve true, full equality, we need to tackle the systemic oppression of all groups of people. It acknowledges that one can both benefit from and be oppressed by the system. For example, gay rights activism in my country, presumably the United States, particularly has a history of being exclusive for people of colour and poor
Don't
people.
drive so fast.
It is also true of mainstream feminism, which has traditionally excluded trans people, as well as women of colour. The movement has attempted to challenge the oppression of one group of people while throwing another group of people under the bus, so to speak. This demonstrates that a movement can simultaneously challenge oppression and be oppressive. It could suggest why so many oppressed people are complicit in their own oppression. Studying Kiriarchy displays that it's more than just rich white Christian men at the tip top, and personally, they're not the ones I find most dangerous. There's a hell of a lot of people a few levels down the pyramid who are more interested in keeping their place in the structure than to turning the pyramid upside down. Note, that would not result in equality. And number 5, it acknowledges that oppressions are interlinked. And so the use of the term Kiriarchy is therefore better, as it demands we take other forms of oppression into account, as well as the privileges. What the feminists have fought with the smooth, otherwise known to everyone else on Earth as real life. Yes, in some ways you will have disadvantages. Yes, in other ways you will have advantages. Yes, things that you are able to do. Femininity. So I decided to examine the veracity of this by looking for a list of masculine traits and feminine traits from a source I could trust to be pro-feminist. The most comprehensive list I could find was from Planned Parenthood, who I think are a satisfactory source for pro-feminist literature. So according to them, words most commonly used to describe, say, femininity are dependent, emotional, passive, sensitive, quiet, graceful, innocent, weak, flirtatious, nurturing, self-critical, soft, sexually submissive, and accepting. And their words to commonly describe masculinity are independent, non-emotional, aggressive, tough-skinned, competitive, clumsy, experienced, strong, active, self-confident, hard, sexually aggressive, and rebellious. Now, let me introduce you to a feminist called Camille Paglia.
Camille Paglia, by title Professor of Humanities at Philadelphia's University of the Arts. By growing reputation, the scourge of American feminism. By self-assessment, America's leading female intellectual. If there's truth in that, it began to emerge in 1990 with the publication of Sexual Persona, an historical analysis of literature and art, which, among other things, hailed the male capacity for creativity. Praised much up later, here is the so-called scourge of modern feminism, Camille Paglia. Recently, you told Charlie Rose that your aim is nothing less than the complete destruction of the Gloria Steinem wing of modern feminism. Want to explain?
Well, I think that that current feminism began laudably 20 years ago, but quickly got off track into man-bashing and a kind of weepy, whiny, white middle-class ideology, and I'm simply trying to bring back the great feminism of the 20s and 30s of Katharine Hepburn and Amelia Earhart, a feminism that stresses independence, self-reliance, personal responsibility, and not blaming other people for your problems.
What Camille is describing would otherwise be known as a good work ethic. She is describing a personality type that would fulfill the potential of the person who displayed it. Because ultimately, the world is a meritocracy. Results matter because results produce money. And realistically, nothing else matters but money. So if we are in a system that values masculinity over femininity, it is because we are in a system in which masculinity produces results, but femininity does not. and results are all that matters, which is a point that Camille herself makes so eloquently.
Right, well, one of my most inflammatory statements in Sexual Persona was, if civilization had been left in female hands, we would still be living in grass huts.
And given the state of the existing matriarchies, I think she's absolutely right. For example, the Muso tribe of China, a member of whom is pictured here performing agriculture with a hand tool, and the Khasi people of northern India, who live in a state of such abject impoverishment that people visit them to marvel at the lack of trash. These are what matriarchies look like. These are the end results of systems that privilege femininity over masculinity. One of the myriad reasons that people hate feminism is because they know that when you complain about the patriarchy, you are complaining about the meritocracy. You are complaining about a system that allows anyone who works hard, anyone with the predisposition to produce results, to rise to the top, where they rightfully belong. Yes, it is a difficult system. Yes, it requires things of you. And yes, men may well be more predisposed towards hard work than women. They ultimately don't really have any other option. But look at what it produces. The reason that women defend it is because it is such a good and productive system. And feminists who complain that they are quote unquote oppressed by this system because the system quote privileges masculinity over femininity is because the people who are displaying the masculine traits are the ones who are getting results. To sum this up, feminists are lazy, which is why instead of engaging with the meritocracy, joining a STEM field and producing results of their own, they do gender studies courses instead, because gender studies doesn't involve any hard work.
I was appointed as Goodwill Ambassador for UN Women 6 months ago. And the more I've spoken about feminism, the more I have realized that fighting for women's rights has too often become synonymous with man-hating. And my recent research has shown me that feminism has become an unpopular word. Why has the word become such an uncomfortable one?
Welcome to part 3 of Why Does Everyone Hate Feminism? In this series I attempt to explain to bewildered feminists exactly why everyone is sick of their shit. In this installment we'll be looking at the pervasive myth that is the gender pay gap. The gender pay gap is possibly the most insidious and pervasive myth that feminism perpetuates. And you would not believe the caliber of people who are fooled by it. Anyway, let's see if we can get someone to explain the gender pay gap for us.
According to equal pay activists, the difference in men's and women's salaries means women in the UK are effectively working for free from early November until the beginning of January. The UK's gender pay gap for full-time workers stands at nearly 9.4.
You might know who Innuendo Studios is, otherwise known as Ian Danskin. If you don't know, you might be familiar with Ian from a Huffington Post segment that he was the star of.
Like, if you're jealous of...
What is happening?
Listen, give me a shout if you ever want to do a bounty. It's an easy way to make some money. Oh. Hey, it's me. Remember to give me a call if you need my expertise.
Proves two things. No neurological damage, and your son is never going to be chief fry cook. In teens, there are two likely causes of night terrors. Post-traumatic stress, any recent shootouts at your high school? Well then, Dave.
Dan.
If there's no trauma, the other cause is sexual abuse. So who's molesting you? Teacher? Extra friendly neighbor? I'd ask if either of you were involved, but you denied.
No, we would never do anything to hurt Dan.
I say it here, it comes out there. This lack of response is consistent with abuse.
There's no one, okay? I swear. There was trauma. I got hit in the head during a lacrosse game.
Did you know that he got hit in the head?
They didn't mention it, no.
Yeah. Why bother?
No. We took him to the ER after the game. He was scanned, we tested him, and said he was fine. No concussion, it's got to be something else.
You hound me for my opinion, and then you question my diagnosis. Cool. ER obviously screwed up. Kid's got a concussion.
I had double vision before I was hit.
Well, that changes everything. You need glasses. That's why you had double vision, which is why you got hit, which is why you have a concussion, which is why you have night terrors. You need to see an ophthalmologist, which I am not.
You enjoyed that. I brought a reasonable case to your attention and you shoved it in my face just to humiliate
You're
me.
an only child, aren't you?
Why would you say that?
Because everything is about you. This may seem incredibly controversial, but I think sexual abuse is bad. I just wanted to make sure he wasn't being diddled by daddy or mommy. Anything else is just a bonus.
I'm not an only child.
Interesting.
What?
Don't move. Did I bore you in there?
What? No, not really.
Are you tired?
Sometimes.
He never sleeps. Of course he's tired.
Right now, at this moment, are you tired? That twitch in your leg. Did you feel that?
Didn't hurt.
His leg twitched. I don't see what...
It's called a myoclonic jerk. It's very common when you're falling asleep. Respiration rate falls, and the brain sometimes interprets this as the body dying, so it sends a pulse to wake it up.
So?
So, he's not asleep. He's awake. Admit him. I recognize that loopy G. So, what does the jerk tell us?
Nothing good. The brain's losing control of the body. Can't order the eyes to focus, regulate sleep patterns, or control muscles.
Movement disorder or degenerative brain disease. Either way, this kid's gonna be picking up his diploma and diapers in a wheelchair.
Maybe not that bad. Could be an infection.
You wish. No fever, no white count. Anyone think this differential diagnosis might be compromised because we don't have an accurate family history?
I took an accurate family history.
You didn't even take an accurate family. His father's not his father. Why would the guy who tucked you in at night was your daddy?
Make it 100.
Okay, you're going for the codes. I'll tell my contact to meet you off Elgin Avenue. My contact's trying to drop her bureau surveillance. I mean, that would be tough in normal circumstances, but these guys have a real hard-on for her. In a non-creepy, just annoying sense. So anyway, we're hoping for the best, preparing for the worst. That's why we got a team of 4 on this. Let's go. My contact needs to be able to get in and out quick. Make sure the entrance to the lot isn't blocked by your vehicle.
structural abnormalities.
No space-occupying tumors.
He's 16, so he should have an absolutely pristine brain. The smallest thing is abnormal.
Meningeal enhancement. My bet is viral meningitis.
Excellent. Did you see what he did there? Took a small clue that there's an neurological problem. Wasn't afraid to run. No, there's not. He's completely wrong.
Then what clue are you talking about?
He knew that I saw something on the MRI, so he figured there must be something there and took a guess. Clever, but also pathetic.
So what did you find?
Take a close look at the corpus callosum.
It looks okay.
Are we all looking at the same thing? 200 million interhemispheric nerve fibers, the George Washington Bridge between the left and right side of the brain. It's subtle.
There's some bowing. There. An upward arch.
Are you guessing?
Yes.
Too bad, you're right.
Probably just moved. Nobody stays perfectly still for the entire MRI.
Yeah, probably got restless and shifted one hemisphere of his brain from a comfortable position. Something is pushing him.
There was bowing. Could be a tumor.
Do you see a tumor in this MRI?
No, but I don't see any bowing either.
There's no tumor, just a blockage and some pressure-causing symptoms. Today, night terrors. Tomorrow, it's bleeding out of his eyes. Get him a radionucleotide cisternogram and guarantee you'll see a blockage. Okay.
Now I'm injecting a material that's tagged with a radioisotope. It's going into your spine, travel up to your brain. It'll make you able to think deep thoughts.
You here for the access codes? Humane Labs? All right. When I get the all clear, we'll give you the codes. Can I get sign-off? We need to be sure about that. That bang. That was you, right? Or someone associated
Their
to you?
eyes aren't the same color, but that flick in the eyes.
What you're getting
It's
into
maybe
right now is a
1 in
whole
10
different
chance that they're
ballgame, my
not
friends.
No. Houses are
You got the
gonna pay
go-ahead?
based on that.
We got
Any
it.
excuse we can give the folks to justify DNA tests?
We could tell him he's got Huntington's. Confirm some tests.
The FIB, what are these clowns doing here? Shit!
There's a lot
Move
of
up!
I've scheduled in for surgery. We're going to touch down into the ventricles to give the cerebrospinal fluid an out.
No more pressure. Everything goes.
The Bureau's coming at us. Damn it. Do not surrender. Take them out. We are burned if you are caught.
Plans normal.
Think they don't work?
I think some multinational pharmaceutical company wants me to think they work. Pad their bottom line.
May I?
Ribbit. Ribbit.
Yeah, all natural, no dyes is a good business. All natural children's toys. Toy companies, they don't arbitrarily mark up their frogs. They don't lie about how much they spend on research and development. The worst that a toy company can be accused of is really boring frog.
Ribbit. Ribbit. Ribbit.
You know another really good business? Teeny tiny baby coffins. You can get them in frog green, fire engine red. Really. The antibodies in Yummy Mummy only protect the kid for 6 months, which is why these companies think they can gouge you. They think that you'll spend whatever they ask to keep your kid alive. Want to change things? Prove them wrong. A few hundred parents like you decide they'd rather let their kid die than cough up $40 for a vaccination. Believe me, prices will drop really fast. Ribbit, 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 ribbit.
Tell me what she has.
complications in surgery? Surgery went fine, he's in recovery, but we took a vital CSF and tested it. Really? Turns out the bullying wasn't the cause of his problems, it was a symptom.
Overgrowth bands and increased intrathecal IgG.
Which means multiple sclerosis. And the reason it takes 3 of you to tell me this?
Because we're having a disagreement about whether or not it is MS.
No lesions on the MRI.
It's early, he's had disease for maybe 2 weeks.
External criteria requires 6 months to make a definitive diagnosis.
Oh, who cares about McPherson? I hear he tortured kittens.
McDonald.
Oh, McDonald. Wonderful doctor. Love kittens.
The VEP indicates slowing of the brain.
Without the lesions, we can't be sure.
0 to 60 in 3 weeks, which
You here for the access codes?
Progressive MS.
Humane
Not
labs?
the fun MS with the balloons and
All right.
bike rides for
When I get the
cripples
all
and
clear,
wheelchairs.
we'll give you the codes.
Wait.
About most
Whole
of the
different
time.
ballgame, my friends.
The guy comes from criminal.
You got the go-ahead?
Criminal investigations
We got it.
journalism background. And the ironic thing about this is, the guy started following
The FIB, what are these clowns doing here? Shit!
got bought up by Gawker, and he's one of the founding editors of Gawker. So he bailed from Kotaku to start Polygon and started right, and now, you know, the same kind of bullshit is happening at Polygon. So you kind of have to feel for the guy when...
Bureau's coming at us. Damn it! Do not surrender. Take them out. We are burned if you are caught.
Also now on Polygon, I don't know. I think he's trying to stabilize the inside, because, at least from my experience on Brian Percente's work, he actually done good. And I'm hoping he will step up to the plate.
Okay,
I'm sorry, people keep saying mailbox.
You need to clean up these agents. They're chasing a payoff and they will keep coming.
But yeah, I don't know. Lost track of my thought. Yeah, okay, so there was Polygon units doing obviously What's the situation with Gama Sutra? Are their numbers still pretty abysmal?
Well, here's the thing. Advertisers are pulling out, and I checked the traffic rankings for Kotaku, Polygon, and also Gama Sutra. There's a slight bump going up, but for me, the traffic rankings don't matter anymore because the advertisers are pulling out. The advertisers are pulling out, they're not getting money from those advertisers. So now, you're going to have a higher traffic ranking, which means you're going to have to pay for their server costs. Which means you have, you know,
Looks like you're clear, but we've heard that before. Drop the codes at HQ and look out for tails.
Number 1 ranking for all I know. They don't have advertisers. So, but, you know, having 0 advertisers, hey, good on them. Good on them.
Do you think those numbers are real, or do you think they're inflated as a way to try to push back against
It's inflated. It is inflated because it's controlled by you guys should Google this video. It's called The Problem with Facebook. It's an in-depth analysis on why Facebook, you know, likes are pretty much bullshit, and it's an entryway into basically the, you know, the click farming world that happens outside the United States, where there's literally a whole bunch of firms that hire a bunch of people to click on their stuff and drive traffic up. So Google that again. The problem with Facebook, it's the same thing that, you know, I wouldn't put it past Docker or Kotaku or Rock Paper Shotgun or Gama Sutra to use these click farms outside to the United States to bump up the ranking and essentially, you know, provide fake traffic to them.
Yeah, I can see that happening. Also, welcome to the chat, TB.
Hi, I'd like to talk about my long-standing axe that I have to grind with minorities.
Hoping that your rest and recovery is doing fine.
I've been keeping up with it.
Yeah, it has been...
By email, because I thought, you know, this seems like the best way to go about it, and it came about initially because I was trying to get this panel together, and so we could really kind of nail this thing down. Like, I firmly believe dialogue is the way to get this shit fixed. And it was the lack of dialogue in the first place that drove everybody to this extent, and we are now where we are now as a direct result of that. And, I mean, you all probably know the story by this point. When Game Journal Pros was leaked by Breitbart, the guys who were on my panel in the same day basically said, yeah, we're not gonna do this anymore. because we don't want to bring the heat. Basically, we don't want anything involved. We don't want to be involved in it. And since then, it's just been emails back and forth between various people. And you know what's really, really depressing about the whole thing is that every single person I've spoken to who is publicly anti-Gamergate has been willing to hear me out in private.
Hold the line mentality, circle the wagons kind of thing.
Kachera, fucking real-life backseat moderator.
He really is.
I don't have a great deal of respect for that guy. After he went after Eric Kane so long ago, and you know, it showed his flagrant hypocrisy in the process. And after he wrote that stupid article about ad block, like every one of us who is running an ad-supported business model cringed when he wrote that fucking thing, because we've realized that you can't stop ad block. The only thing that you can do is discuss kind of a calm and rational manner with people. Like, this is how the business model works. I understand that you find ads annoying. Everyone finds ads annoying, but you know, this is kind of how we pay our rent. But I understand if you choose to use it, and there's not really much we can kind of do about it. Condemning people for it is the fucking worst strategy, because it radicalizes people. This is what fucking Gamergate became. It is a bunch of people who didn't want their identity attacked, who ended up being radicalized. And read what Felicia said a couple of days ago. There's another point that you can take from that, and that's that she brought up this idea of being afraid to talk about it, and I really think it goes far further. I don't think it's basically just I'm afraid to mention Gamergate because I'm a woman. I really think it's actually a lot of people are afraid to mention anything that goes against this very loud authoritarian viewpoint. And I've again spoken to all the social media guys, and the thing that I brought up time and time again is like, why exactly have you not critiqued Anita Sarkeesian's work? Because here's a list of factually wrong things she said, and here's a list of logical leaps she's made. Because honestly, if you're very reductive about what she's saying, then you can come to the conclusion, oh, I mean, she just wants more diverse characters. Yeah, pretty much everyone can get behind that, and a lot of what she says makes sense, because frankly, she's not the first person to say it. We've been saying that we need better written characters in games and less code writing for decades. This is not a new thing. Games critics have consistently been saying this. But it's when she makes the logical leaps, like the Hitman Absolution thing, that really gets me. Saying this is deliberately placed here to carefully concoct sexual arousal and allow for punishing the representation of female sexuality. And like, based on
how are you getting to that?
I mean, that is the kind of statement that someone who has already come to their conclusion makes before they attempt to cherry pick this argument. And it doesn't make a great deal of sense, and I think that one of the things that she does very, very badly is to understand mechanical context, which you cannot ignore in video games. It's impossible.
She's not right. Well, yeah, and I think part of the problem with Sarkeesian is, you're right. If you came out and made the statement, I want better video game characters, who's going to argue with it? Nobody's really going to say, okay. But she doesn't do that, though. She on the one hand says something like that, which most people find agreeable, but then on the other hand says, the reason we can't have this is because obviously everything is terrible in the industry, or because the games that you like or the play mechanics that you enjoy represent hurting women or hurting minorities or hurting, you know, any kind of a group. It's weird. It's like a intermixture, an interwoven mixture of agreeable statements and then just utter tripe. You know what I mean? And that's why I think people aren't receptive to it. And personally, I think she's a con artist, but I do agree with you that some of her arguments aren't necessarily bad, but I just don't buy it.
Here's what's weird about this. I think most of feminist frequency, if you look at it deep enough, it's actually a patriarchal relationship with Sarkeesian just being a sock puppet, and everything is just full Macintosh. Because if you think about it, Macintosh is the writer, he's also the producer. So Sarkeesian is essentially just there to be a pretty face and, you know, to do what Macintosh is doing.
Yeah, I don't like Macintosh because I've read certain tweets he's put out, and it's very Jack Thompson-like. It's very video games are terrible.
There was one specific tweet that really got my back up, and I believe there was another one that I saw, but I can't find it anymore. I don't know if it was being removed or whatever the case. And it was, let's see if I can dig this.
Ben Ventura just went on a rant.
I'm sure he did.
Like everybody
If Venkatesh is listening to this stream, please calm the fuck down. You are not helping him. God,
like,
you know, we've had some respectful conversations. But I have met you in real life, Ben, and you were pretty cool back then. Can you please stop stirring?
How's LAPD's doing? Come on, folks.
I know I have all the steak I want, but if you don't get that salad bar out of my provincial vision, I'll start him to murder people.
Yeah, he's so off. He's so off. Yeah, I didn't like the chair when the game thing happened, and I didn't like his reaction. There was a thread on Giant Bomb talking about what had happened, and he made an account to go talk to them. And got his ass chewed out by all the forum users, and actually messaged a mod to shut it down. Like, he's just anti. There are caps of it. He got an award. That's how you can tell that he actually got the mod. Like, he get an award or something for his first time talking to a mod. And right after he got that award, the thread got shut down.
This is the tweet from Radical Bytes that really started to get me. Aggression is not the same as physical violence. Saying some games are a risk factor and increased aggression should not be controversial. Except if it's very, very controversial, like scientific. You will be very hard pressed. There's one study that had very tenuous links that said playing video games for a certain amount of time increased the aggression in certain kinds of people. But it was also, the conclusion that they kind of drew there was that it was more idea of the competitive attitude and also the survival instinct kicking in that really caused that sort of stuff to happen. And that really is the sort of thing that does sound very controversial. I'm pretty sure it's based on a statement about violent video games as well. That flies in the face of violence, and I strongly dislike it. And I think that may be the reason why some people are wary of and in reality, you are allowed to say whatever you want. We have free speech. Go on YouTube, create whatever video you like about whatever subject. And being wrong on the internet is not a cardinal sin. But it would be nice to have a real discussion about it. And I would love to see any major gaming website, instead of just, here's Anita's latest video, say, here's our opinions on it. I think it was only the Escapists that tried to do that. And that was a fairly short video they did quite a while ago called No Right Answer. And outside of that, that's been about it.
Well, it raises an issue of impropriety. Like, you have Sarkeesian putting out these videos, and nobody will critique it, nobody will discuss it. It's always a positive support thing, and I think to a lot of people what that comes off as is, it looks bad when that's the only message. When you can never, ever question it or debate it. I think somebody was putting around there trying to get something going for, was it GDC next year? To try to get Christina Hoff-Summers and Sarkeesian to have, like, a debate.
Yeah, that,
yeah, Anita would never do
that. But she's skeptical about Sarkeesian actually joining the effort, because Base Mom wants to do it as a panel, so it's not just about Base Mom versus Sarkeesian.
we only needed one of these. Other ones are spare.
That's going back even to the Escapists with like Greg Tito. I disagree with a lot of what Greg Tito has said, but he was the only one out of this entire thing to go into those forums and say, you know what, this is what I did, this is why I did it, and let's talk about it. And I think that's why a lot of people like the Escapists. They're going to the forums and talking. They're, enjoying their content. And I don't know why it is that you have a Tito who's willing to do that. Look how it turned out for him. And yet these other journalists refuse to do it. And it feels like the only reason they're even considering it now is not because they're feeling, I guess, less scared, but because they understand that this boycotting and contacting advertisers has an effect on the bottom line. Do you think that even if they come to the table that the damage is so great at this point that nobody will trust them, or that it's too much to mitigate? You can't undo this kind of damage.
I think that you can undo it, but I think that also people have to be willing to accept that wasn't the initial objective to try and get these people to admit wrongdoing and to actually talk about journalistic ethics. Because I tweeted a couple of days ago, and I was very concerned about some of the stuff that was being said in Kotaku in Action, where it was people saying, nope, too late, too late. I disagree. It's never, ever fucking too late. If you are looking to get these people on your side, and you're looking to get these people to serve you as the consumer, then if they offer a sincere apology and they actually offer to realistically come to the table with you, then you've got to let them do it. You have to, because if you don't give them a way out, and then all they're going to do is they're going to keep circling the wagons, they're going to keep peddling the same narrative, because so far, at least in the mainstream media, that narrative has been working. It might not have been working with us, but it certainly has been working with the mainstream media, and the more they keep parroting it, we've seen the power of the media, the more they keep parroting it, the more people will actually believe it. And I mean, it sort of peter out. I mean, it probably, I imagine it will eventually. Every movement has a shelf life, but I just dearly hope that they will be willing to talk, and that's all I've wanted from the very start. But it's just been so depressing to see people who are not willing to do that. But I think we might be getting to the point where some people will, and when that happens, then I think we can start to really get away from this idea that, you know, that a section of the movement is about harassment. There's this one thing that I said to them, and I've said to everyone that I've discussed this with in private. Look, if you truly believe the movement is about harassment, yeah, then stop talking about harassment. Start talking about ethics. Because what you do when you do that is you starve the people who are actually perpetrating harassment of oxygen. These people want attention, and you're giving it to them. You're giving it to them every single day. You gave them MSNB fucking C.
Right.
What? It's a troll's fucking victory dance.
It really is.
Mainstream media on a platter. What are you doing? What the hell is wrong with you?
See, I don't think they really. I think people, at least the people that I've been paying attention to, have kind of picked up on it. But there are third parties that are actively stirring the pot to try to get reactions. And yeah, MSNBC sure as hell is fuel to the fire for that. But it's weird. I don't know where this is going to go. When this started, at least my main goal when I started talking about it was I was pissed because I thought they had an obligation as journalists to cover things
here.
and
like
to
I
be
said,
honest and not to, you know, do corrupt things or collude with one another. And it seemed like it just kept getting worse and worse. And especially with the Fine Young Capitalists, that really investigate that.
The latest by William Usher is actually the smoking gun, and it happened at Destructoid. So if you guys haven't seen that story yet, you should. Apparently, Destructoid is caught up on reporting that involves a game developer, a live Twitch suicide, and essentially a cover-up. And followed by that cover-up is a blacklisting that happened right inside the Game Journal Pros list.
Yeah, see, this can't be allowed to happen. They can't. People like this cannot be allowed to wield that kind of power. I know it's just games media. I get it. People say it's just games journalism, but they have an ethical responsibility. They have standards for their profession.
I'm not even buying that it's only games media. What's the biggest entertainment industry in the world?
Gaming.
Exactly, it's gaming. You know, it's not just games media. This is fucking colossal. I really think it's important to consider exactly what we're expecting of them when they come to the table. I do totally agree with Todd Listener here. He's absolutely right. If we don't give them a way out, and I think the fact that they don't have a way out is why they've gone off the rails and collected.
Well, no, I mean, I disagree that they had a way out. They could have done what Great did. What these games did.
They refused.
Just to kind of double advocate a little bit there, Kotaku kind of did. Like, they revised their ethical policies as a direct result of Gamergate. The problem that I currently have with them, and I've said this directly to the people that work there, is that they have not accepted the conflict of interest that has been proven. And I'm not talking about this idea that Nathan Grayson reviewed Zoe Quinn's game. That's actually false. What we do know is that he reported on an article that was written by Jared Rosen. He effectively, I mean, he just blogged about it really. He just took portions from Jared Rosen's article that was sourced from Zoe Quinn regarding the Polaris Game Jam. And in doing so, plugs her game jam and her game. And this happened what could have been 24 hours before Kotaku recognized that Zoe Quinn had started engaging in a romantic relationship. And of course, we already know that they knew each other prior to that. And that simply is, you are reporting on a friend. You need to disclose that.
It goes even further than that, though. I mean, what really angered me, like, Stephen Totillo came out and he first addressed the Grayson thing, and I thought it was a line of crap. We had a relationship 24 hours after, whatever. But at least he addressed it. Then he addressed Patreon. You know, Kirk Hamilton was donating money to Zoe Quinn, and so he's like, you know what, we're gonna draw a line and say you can't personally support somebody against you're reporting on it. Of course. Right, but he never addressed Patricia Hernandez.
Yes, so there was this one comment he made, and I don't like the comment because I feel that it's a cop-out. He didn't even address it in an article, he addressed it in a comment, and he said that he believed they were innocent mistakes. And I was like, Patricia Hernandez has been in the game for quite some time, and I don't believe that you believe those were actually innocent mistakes. That's not something that you can really get away with. And the fact of the matter is that they did go back and retroactively disclose it. So they recognized there was a problem, but they won't. It's like, in that situation, wouldn't you push Patricia to apologize?
Well,
or wouldn't
this
you
is
write
my
this
point.
up?
Actually, that was exactly my point. The thing is, you are right. They've made lip service concessions, but they haven't changed anything. You know what we're looking at is required is like systematic reform. You know, the whole thing has to be reshaped at least, because you know everything. There is a hell of a lot going on in there that really shouldn't be going on, and
agreed.
So basically, when they come to the table, I mean, a bunch of people are probably going to have to get fired. You know.
Well, it raises concerns about, I mean, Stephen Totillo's position as editor-in-chief. As editor-in-chief, he should have oversight on his staff. I mean, he should know this stuff. So it raises either one of two things. Either Stephen Totillo knew all this stuff was going on and he didn't care and allowed it, or he was unaware that this was going on and his staff is out of control. Either way, that makes him look very bad as an editor-in-chief. Like, he should have come out and issued a statement saying, and this isn't even like Kirk Hamilton with the Patreon thing, I think was bad. A slap on the wrist would have been fine. But in regards to like Grayson and Hernandez, that's a bigger issue. There should have been something more than just a hand waving it off with 4 or 5 Twitter statements and a paragraph in the editor's column on Kotaku. He really should have stepped up and done something. Anything would have been better than nothing, Steven. You know, it just I don't know what's going on with this guy.
Sorry, it's I swear to God, there's this culture, like Todd was saying, that it's a culture of fear that they create. You can't really speak out against it. So the only things we've seen have been really perfunctory gestures. You know, nothing that would actually have caused Gamergate to actually end. You know, because the problem is the principle of the game, isn't it? You know, it doesn't go 2 months over a bit of corruption. Now it's the goddamn principle that they're all involved, they're all supporting this. How can this be going on? You know, how can they be attacking their audience? This is madness. And, you know, so they've got some... whatever culture they've generated, just watch Alexander's talk. She is brazen. She is just absolutely brazen about how biased she is, how she's trying to inject her agenda into gaming, and everyone can fuck themselves.
Hey, Sargon, you shared the video of Alexander's MSNBC interview. I have it linked on the chat. It's where she literally goes into a black hole. That moment. You haven't seen that one? Yeah, you shared that one. It happens at 4 minutes and 6 seconds, and she literally just loses it. So I have it linked on the stream chat.
Yeah,
here.
I might have watched it when I was in bed.
Well, I agree with what you're saying, Sargon. I mean, I think the thing that I found most concerning in regards to Game Journals Pro, aside from the feeling that there are people behind the scenes kind of pressuring what you can talk about and what you can't, is I think it was Navarro who said it. Well, if they're angry about this, they're going to be angry about the fact that I'm a member of 7 other secret groups. So that's the thing. Like, is this like high? It feels like junior high school. It feels like these people treat their profession like it's junior high school.
Yeah, a lot of jokes being made in it. It's the amount of snark and derision that really gets me. I understand that it's very tempting to engage in that kind of behavior when you're being dogpiled. And let's be honest, a lot of viewers and a lot of people just don't know what they're talking about.
Right.
And that's fine, but you can only really do that to a point without really starting to get people's backs up. And I learned that in the past. You know, I engaged in that fucking behavior, and it made me look like an idiot. And that's now on the internet forever, and there's nothing I can do about that. And it just seems to me that people who have been in this industry for longer than me should kind of know better.
Right. It's really ridiculous when you think about the fact that, or at least, I mean, some of these are large companies. Gawker's a fairly large company. I'm just floored by the fact that nobody in PR would step in and say, what are you doing? You can't, you know, Patricia, you can't call people.
I'm not sure they have PR.
They are the PR. That's the thing.
They have the PR skills of a spitting cobra.
Well, they need to hire someone. Nick Denton needs to shell out some money and get Gawker some PR people, because...
Here's something that actually affects me and a lot of my peers in indie game dev. A lot of these journalists and essentially their PR
a lot of them take advantage of the anonymous jury systems that are in place in the IGF and the NDK. Those anonymous jury systems in and themselves are literally a clique where they can take advantage of their anonymity and they can use the system to literally drive indie game dev. And for me, when people talk about cliques and they talk about this industry collusion and it's high school, it's like, yeah, that's all well and funny, and that attitude is something that's something I don't want to condone. But when it starts affecting the culture of game devs and people just trying to get in this industry, I take serious offense at it, because this is the kind of collusion that I'm trying to fight. And it's in the rumor mill, and I think it's already fact. The fact that a lot of these game journalists, they go inside the anonymous jury system of the IGF and in the NDK, and they pimp out their friends.
Well, and that's an issue. I mean, one of the other issues, aside from like the consumer's perspective, is the game developer perspective. I mean, you're talking about indie developers, right?
Yeah.
And you have all these issues that are popping up with them. I mean, what was it? I keep screwing this up. Was it the IDGA guy that had talked today and said?
The IDGA guy and Jonathan Blow are literally on a Twitter rampage, trying to threaten indie game developers who say, "Hey, we will remember forever. If you support Gamergate, it's gonna hurt your business career for the rest of your fucking life." I'm
right,
like,
and
wow.
that's something that
Hashtag the internet is forever.
Right, but that's something that should not be happening. I mean, you can't have a situation where these people wield power and say, "Listen, if you're not on our side, if you don't agree with what we say, you're gone." I mean, one of Jaffe's arguments against Gamergate from the start was, "It's not a big deal. I don't see this happening." And even when you brought him evidence, he's like, "I don't see it as happening." When you had people like Leigh Alexander making these horrible statements, kind of standing as a gatekeeper at Gamasutra. And the funny thing is, like, Jaffe puts up applications to work at his studio on Gamasutra. So like, if you're looking for a job, you're going to this website, and this website's connected to people that are threatening you and your career. So now you have people from IDGA and all these other organizations that are basically saying, if you're not on our side, you're never going to work in the industry. That can't happen.
I think the thing with Jaffe is that he has been in a position where he is far beyond the influence of any of these people for a very, very long time. And outside of the bullshit that occurred with him and Kuchera years ago, he's kind of untouchable. And as a result, I imagine he does not view this as a particularly big issue. But I think that indies who are just starting out, that don't really have that level of support, that is a big issue. And I fundamentally disagree with this idea. We're going to blacklist you if you have anything to do with gaming. If you can prove that that person actually engaged in harassment, great. You know what happened when the, God, what the hell are they called? Code Avarice guys? They recently threatened to kill Gabe Newell.
Oh God, yeah.
Condemned it. Like, gamers across the board fucking condemned it, because that was someone who was actually publicly, and probably not seriously, but publicly threatening someone within the industry. Like, proven. Not even a question about it. It's not guilt by association. Actually did it. And everyone came down on him, and rightfully fucking so. And if a person is proven to be engaged in harassment, absolutely come down on them. Absolutely blacklist that person. But being vaguely associated to a hashtag that people have freely admitted that they don't really fully understand, and is about so many different things and involves so many different people, and is leaderless and doesn't have a set agenda or manifesto. If you're saying that being even vaguely associated with that is grounds for blacklisting, then I'm extremely concerned that you might have the influence to do something like that. I don't think that this IGDA guy does.
Oh, and I'm sure he doesn't, but statements like this
that's pretty... Yeah, what, sorry, we support inclusivity? Do we?
Right. It's just, it's crazy to me that these people, and again, it goes back to their hubris. I mean, they're so, sorry, they're so arrogant about it. They'll make these statements and think that nothing happens, and you're talking about the snark. I don't know if it's snark from him, if he's just shooting the shit on the internet, or if he's being serious about it, but...
Twitter. Like, I wish we could just delete Twitter.
I know. I hate social media so goddamn much. I've had to use it for this Gamergate thing. It's just, I'm not a fan of social media.
Social media, social justice, social engineering, all in the social sphere.
But
now I understand why I'm on social.
See why they're getting so arrogant. Because there have been no real consequences for anything. All the consequences they've endured, they've effectively chosen. to play the victim, to publicise this harassment. It's all benefited. You know, no one's been fired, no one's been ostracized from the team, no one's been reprimanded in any way for their poor behaviour and unethical conduct.
Well, I mean, God, look at Sam Fennell. I mean, they said he was promoted. That's ridiculous.
It's funny, and this is why Leia Alexander, she literally, at her XOXO Fest said, I declared gamers are over and I still have a job. And she was like, we must be winning, we must be doing something about it, something like that. And it's just like, this is a culture war as they see it. They see it as a culture war. They are trying to take over. And they've got to the point where they realise that there is no one around who can remove them from their positions. So this is why gamers have got to go beyond them, go to
Well, yeah, that's why they're removing the sites. I mean, that's going to be the end result, and it's going to. These people are hurting their own peers.
They're idiots. It's unbelievable. They've got no sense of self-awareness at all. They have no idea how they look at people who aren't in their feet. And because they live in their little echo chambers, all they hear are the same. Look at their obsession with the narrative. They're so concerned with the narrative. It's weird that they've got some method in their heads of just ignoring things that are just not, that don't confirm what they want to believe. And so they can just go on as a group and all just say, no, that piece of information, that was nonsense. You don't have to pay attention to that. Just pay attention to the bits we want to believe. And then as a group, we're all completely justified in anything we do. I can't explain it.
Hell, I mean, you'd think if you wanted to make some ad revenue, considering these websites are making fuck all money, you'd want to write as many articles as possible. So why don't you try looking at it from the other side? You know, that's a good way to make a little bit extra. I don't know. I do think that eventually, at least some sites will be forced to acknowledge some issues like this. And it's really weird that we see IGN, who I knew for the longest time as the kings of corrupt game journalism, actually writing a reasonable assessment and saying, look, yeah, we see this harassment going on. And there is harassment going on, but they didn't point out specifically who's doing it or towards whom. There is harassment going on towards everyone. It is associated with the happenings surrounding Gamergate. It is not endorsed by Gamergate, but it is occurring regardless because that's what happens whenever there's any controversy. Unfortunately, controversy breeds hostility, which breeds harassment. Whether you like it or not, you've got to be extremely careful when dealing with that stuff. But I really do feel that the games media has done a terrible job of de-escalation. In fact, they've done the exact opposite.
They really have. I've never seen a group shoot themselves so hard in the foot. Everything they could have done wrong, they did. Instead of apologizing or addressing the issues, they did. Instead of having open conversation, they censored. Instead of trying to resolve any of these problems, they just kept bringing up more. It's like they couldn't help themselves. They felt so secure.
I'm so curious about that. It's like they could have profited from this. If we're just thinking about bottom line, right? If we took a neutral stance and addressed both sides of the issue, and let people fight over it, drive more traffic to their sites. We could be all here looking at Kotaku right now, but we're actually boycotting Kotaku, and we're taking away their ad revenue.
That's why it feels like it's ideologically driven. Because you're right.
Absolutely. There is no doubt about it.
Because they could have made a huge amount of money. Yeah.
Absolutely. They're such goddamn fools. But this is absolutely ideological. There's no getting around it. There's no getting away from it. I mean, I never use the phrase cultural marketing. I never use it. But just look into academia. They do readings of Edward Bernays, the guy who coined the term public relations, which propaganda was his work. I literally was speaking to Shira Chess from Diver, and I was like, look, I'm an actual Marxist, and she was like, yeah, we're all Marxists. Adrian Shaw was like, what is this, the 60s? Marxism was the dirty work. It's like, it just doesn't work, you know?
Clear skies, bring the Hydra in and we'll take a look at that EMP.
It's like, right, okay, they are actively pushing the ideological agenda. I mean, in the Playful's Political, you've got Adrian Shaw saying, what have we done to get feminism into games and push our agenda? And then you've got Andrew Grant Wilson saying, look, I know you're all talking about signal boosting.
Golden age of television, because the late part of radio was the best, and the early part of television was the best, and I had them both. And radio, of course, it's a common place to say that it left everything open to the imagination because it was just words and you could form your own pictures. In 1943, I'm 6 years old, and I'm beginning to get up and down Broadway on my own. The theaters along Broadway, the movie theaters then, and a few of them featured older movies that were in re-release. Suddenly there was this spate of Horse Feathers and Duck Soup and all the Marx Brothers movies, and I began to see them and the anarchy of them. That's the fact that they could go through a hotel lobby, light a couch on fire, take a man's toupee off, and that all people did was go like this, you know. They weren't arrested or grabbed or anything. They would run. They were chased maybe by one guy. So that appealed to me, just the sheer nonsense and the uprooting of norms. It's 1947, I'm about 10. Danny Kaye appealed to me because of the verbal artistry. I was beginning to understand and be attracted to difficult verbal things, interesting lyrics of popular songs. I tried to learn Dry Bones, Dem Bones, gonna walk around. I tried to learn Bongo, 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 I don't want to leave the Congo. Anything that was verbally difficult started appealing to me for some reason, and I didn't even define it then, it just was going on. We lived on the cusp between the Columbia University neighborhood and what we called White Harlem, West Harlem. Columbia University and Theological Seminary in the world, Jewish Theological Seminary on the next street, largest in the world, Juilliard School of Music, all of these institutional things of higher learning, higher attainment. And then down here we had the Cubans and the Puerto Ricans and the blacks in the street and the working class Irish and the interesting smells of cooking and the interesting music coming out of the windows and the Irish guys, my guys on the street corner. Lots of us. There were a lot. The Irish had big families and there were hundreds of us within a 10 by 10 block area. And my mother, of course, wanted us to go up the hill. Go up the hill, strive upward, reach, let your reach exceed your grasp. And she would have loved that for us. And
all right, you on the way to the LS Naval Port?
My brother and I,
close
6 years old,
so I'll let you know if there are any problems on the horizon. Get the chopper,
we headed
get
down
out.
the hill.
That's the order of the day.
And the adolescent, the testosterone, place with the testosterone.
You can approach Meriwether's positions from the front
and we
or the
couldn't
back.
reject it all.
On land
When I was a little boy in New York City in the 1940s, we swam in the Hudson River, and it was filled with raw sewage, okay? We swam in raw sewage, you know, to cool off. And at that time, the big fear was polio. Thousands of kids died from polio every year. But you know something? In my neighborhood, no one ever got polio. No one, ever. You know why? Because we swam in raw sewage. It strengthened our immune system. The polio never had a prayer. We were tempered in raw shit. Very good experience in first year high school. My grammar school was idyllic. Grammar school.
Valkyrie attack choppers got 3 gun placements.
But high
Many
school
positions on either side and a large caliber explosive round gun in the co-pilot's seat. So, one of you will fly it, the other 3 will shoot. That's on the off chance there's anything to shoot other than seagulls.
Second year was punitive wars and translation. It bored the hell out of me, and I wanted to get on with my life. I wanted to learn how to be a disc jockey, be a comedian, be an actor. So I left, and I went in the Air Force as one of the ways to do that, to get away. My mother and I were by now at loggerheads. And I just joined when I was 17. I got permission to join. I was in the Air Force. I was in Strategic Air Command, which was the real mother of everything, you know. At that time, there were no nuclear submarines. There were no silos, intercontinental missiles. There were only atom bombs and hydrogen bombs. They were dropped by 36s or B-47s. I was in a B-47 squadron. Those were the primary bombers at the time. So we kept the peace for quite a while. As I said, there was no triad of deterrence. We just had these bombers, and that was it. I worked at Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana. And we had the H-bombs, and I saw them, you know, I saw them with blankets over them, but they would load them into these B-47 runs all the time, because that was the principle of SAC. Always have a certain number of planes in the air, and a certain number on the ground ready to go. And I was a mechanic on these planes. I jokingly say I helped keep the peace, because you'll notice that while I was in the Air Force, the Russians didn't kill anything. Before that, that was Vietnam. So I was in this. There's no question that my makeup doesn't fit regulation structure and authority. Never did. I rebelled. I happened to wind up with 3 court-martials. One of them was falling asleep on guard during a unit simulating combat mission. I'll be proud of that. Failure to obey a lawful order. But you can. And thirdly, showing a certain amount of disrespect to a non-commissioned officer. But I was very lucky I didn't serve any time. On the record. So it came time, and this is important to hear this. White they decided to cut some defense spending. And they decided to cut some military, a certain number, 100,000 or something, whatever big number. And the Air Force, they said, cut some. And they said, in a particular case of the Air Force, they were looking around for people who had, they were 3 criteria. One was, you've been out of your career for why had you ever been? Secondly, and thirdly, it's not intended to be perfect. So these people were eligible under an article, regulation called 3962. An honorable, general discharge of honorable. And the colonel told me I should go to Colonel Matthews and said, we're going to this job as well. And went to Boston. I wanted to be in the big market. It was square peg, round hole time. I went to a place I didn't really fit. As a 20-year-old with rock and roll roots, and I went to a station that played quote-unquote good music and network affiliation. Still had soap operas. So I didn't quite fit there, but Jack was on that station. Jack Blaney. And he and I roomed together with a third guy, and found we had a great comic affinity. And we found we had this ability to improvise. And for the 4 months I was there, because I had to leave there, unfortunately, before I could land, Jack and I split up. I wound up in Fort Worth with a good rock and roll job.
How you doing? George Carlin here, inviting you to become a member of our Big Swingin' KXOL Teen Club. Big contests, big prizes, big fun for you and all of Fort Worth's teenagers.
Jack showed up there on his way to Hollywood. Star. And the job just opened up that day. Took it, developed the act there, and 2 months later we decided to put it on the radio and drive to Hollywood in my new Dodge Dart Pioneer. To the door with the tinted windows and the AM/FM. We drove to Hollywood, and we took that fabled American trip west. Don't forget what it just comes before, before 1960. Comedy. Those material and projecting personalities like Mort Sullivan, Shelley Brown, Nicholas May, Bob Newhart, Dick Gregory, Jonathan Rennie, late 50s and early 60s, had reshaped comedy, given it a new feeling.
That's it. Clear skies. Good work. My people are waiting to babysit the bird just north of the Alamo Sea. Drop it and you're done.
Attacking them, as opposed to the kids today, as opposed to that, nothing sort of comedy. This was comedy about values of the world, self. We did things about freedom rides and integration. So now much
We've collected quite a fleet for this op. The light armored personnel carriers, the jump jet, and now the attack chopper. Countries have been invaded with less. Unsuccessfully. You know what I say? You can never be too prepared or too well equipped. Why outthink the other guy when he can outspend him? Ideally using someone else's funds. Looks like you're almost with them. Bring the chopper down easy. You don't want to mess this up now.
We're in this little apartment, and we watched the Jack Parr show. The Jack Parr show was a place where you wanted to go and see and heard, and prior to Johnny Carson, it was the Tonight Show, it was after Steve Allen, with sometimes everybody. And what we would do was improvise. John Parr, like John Jack Parr. And we would make believe one of us was Parr and the other was one of us. And
Okay.
he would say,
We
well,
got it
tell
from
us, Jack, how did you two guys get together? And we would say stuff like, well, I was Wally, his wife, and he was my mother. And we would just do these outrageous, improvised things about being on Jack Parr. That was February. In October of that year, we were on that show. That's just unheard of. We hadn't formed the act yet. We certainly hadn't left Fort Worth. We were sitting there in our underwears with beer cans, Lone Star beer, making these things up. And in October, which they say October, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, 8 months later, we were on that show. So Burns and I did very well. We worked all the best nightclubs. We worked the nightclubs that Variety reviewed. And we only stayed together 2 years. We went straight to the top, and then not truly. We went very close to being on our way to the top, and then decided, this is, we both, screw it. I wanted to be a single. I'd wanted that for a long time. I was now married about a year, and I took over whatever momentum the team still had. I did a couple of sort of meaningless national television appearances, and I was kind of drifting. And I was in this nightclub stage, but it was 1963 now, 1964. And the first hint of change was occurring. The free speech movement in Berkeley. I'd always been a Bugsman, by the way. I'd always had pot as part of my life, and I think it's a value-changing drug. It's a self-limiting drug, but it's a value-changing drug. Everything you see and that I was restless with this straight path, because I had a kind of a two-track existence I figured out. In order for me to follow this kind of mainstream dream, I had to play their game. I didn't call it that then. No mistake. This is how it was happening. But I had to kind of follow their game, which was, where else are you going to go? You're going to go to television. You're going to variety shows. Things like the Very Como special. I did the Jimmy Rogers show. Hey, the way I broke through nationally was in 1966. The summer of 66, I was on a show called Kraft Summer Music Hall with John Davidson. We wore white pants all the time. Guys had striped vests and straw hats and things. I had to sing Winchester Cathedral. This was all very vanilla American. I didn't know how uncomfortable that was making me. I just knew how uncomfortable I was. And finally that all had to change. And what happened was the culture changed. It began to really be significant. The anti-war movement, the introduction of acid, masculine, so forth, acid, which I think hastened my change, gave me the ability to feel these things, and that's what happened in the late 60s. I abandoned this other dream of mainstream path to Danny Kaye and thought, I'll be myself. I'll start talking about what's in my heart. So I was working at the Copa, and this stuff is, it's just horrifying. They're just staring at me. So I began to tell them that I didn't belong there. I began to say to them, look at these places, this kind of places. This place went out of style 20 years ago. They just don't know it yet. It's as if Cesar Romero dances past me one more time, and I see Dennis Morgan throwing someone out the front door. I'm getting out of here. I said to them, I belong in the colleges. That's where I'm going, and this is where this will be history for me. And I would lie on the floor and underneath the piano, which was on my, a nightclub like that, you're on the same level as the audience. It's not a stage. It's a little dance floor. And I would lie on my back under the piano and read the label under there and describe the underside of the piano. Another time I brought the phone book out and I began to read from the phone book. I wasn't high then. I had already done my psychedelics, months before, but I was really acting out a terrific protest of my own, and I begged them to let me go. And I'd say, let me out of the contract. And Jules Podell, this legendary owner, he was over there with his ring, he'd bang on the table when he wasn't pleased with something. And I'd say, bang away, why don't you let me? They wouldn't let me out of the contract. They'd have to pay me all up. So the last night, during the second show, they just slowly faded my lights in the middle of my hand. Slowly faded my light. And I said whatever the white equivalent of.
All right, let's get the EMP in the LAPV to HLAR. The LAPV APB's still at the safe house on North Calafia.
I had that. I had an incident at the Playboy Club in Wisconsin. And I had the Las Vegas, which was the final thing.
Obviously, this is a malware-style attack, so we need to get the Trojan in without it being identified. It's a genuine Merryweather insurgent with no obvious signs of tampering, so once it's in place, it shouldn't be flagged as suspicious. Until it's too late, that is. We're providing you with suppressed firearms to make a minimum noise impact when dealing with guards. The rest is up to you. There are guards in each other's sight lines who need to coordinate your takedowns. Standard procedure for a gang of no good criminals like us, I'm sure. I thought worth a mention. This is almost my favorite part of the process. Putting on the finishing touches. It's like the night before Christmas. The morning before a test. Yeah, I got a degree. In prison. The anticipation is killing me, so I guess we're all in danger. You'll be happy to know we got a good price for the Hydra. And a jet's a collector's item. Real nostalgic appeal. I just hope it gets used what it was built for, you know? That it's out there bombing orphanages instead of sitting in mothballs appreciating value. Meyer does have a questionable human rights record, mind you. So here's hoping he's not just rolling out for air shows.
Speaking in the first person, I had this act still good, middle class now. And I had these newer things that I was working on. And I conceived the album to myself of FM, which was the first album. And the idea of it was to show that I was going from to what in that time FM was. So FM represented that place I was going and I just reversed it and called them FM. And I did the two sides of the album. One of them is the older album, and the other side is the newer stuff. It was exactly revolutionary. The second one was Last Count, and the second one, which was one 7-word you never seen on television on. The third one came out a year later. That was Occupation Cool. That's the one that had children word to it, which was really sort of important. The first 4 albums all became old, and that was my golden breakthrough. That was the first, well, that was my second piece, because I had been doing pretty nice touring. Burns, and then by myself, very going, all that stuff. Now here comes this third wave of other sort of exposure. This was that led to the rest of the way. Which is true. It's about real that person representing correctly.
Looking for these words, I kept finding new categories. We have so many ways of describing these dirty words. But we have more ways to describe dirty words than we actually have dirty words. That seems a little strange. It seems to indicate that somebody was awfully interested in these words. They kept referring to them. They called them bad, dirty, filthy, foul, vile, coarse, in poor taste, unseemly, street talk, gutter talk, locker room language, barracks talk, bawdy, naughty, saucy, raunchy, rude, crude, lewd, lascivious, indecent, profane, obscene, blue, off color, risque, suggestive, cursing, cussing, swearing, and all I could think of was shit, piss, fuck, cunt, cocksucker, motherfucker, and tits.
All I know is I had a piece of material called 7 Words You Could Never Say on Television. It was an honest analysis from my standpoint of the inconsistency of our standards and as reflected in language about the body's functions, especially as it pertains to sex. Religion has crippled people because it's given them shame and guilt about their bodies and fear. And And this is expressed in these taboos that we have. And I just thought it was fascinating that we have these, I was able to isolate the 7 that had no other saving meanings to them, such as balls has another meaning to it, pussy has another meaning, and I tried to explain that in the routine. But these words, shit, piss, fuck, cunt, cocksucker, motherfucker, and tits, they are what they are. They don't have additional secondary meaning. And so I wanted to, that interested me. So I thought, wow, well, I'll just isolate them. And it happened that that I was able to arrange them in an order where they had this wonderful, all these sort of shit, piss, fuck, cunt, cocksucker, motherfucker to them. And I exploited that. And it was a way of, I guess, doing a lot of things. I don't know. I didn't sit down and have conscious motives, except this will be fun to do. This is interesting, I think, as well. And this sort of needs to be said, not because society needs it, but because I need to hear someone say this, and I'll be the one. A radio station in New York played it. A listener-supported station, therefore no commercials. WBAI played that entire cut in the afternoon of a show called Humbuggery.
I'm otherwise occupied.
They said this show today is about language taboos and some of the inconsistencies and so forth. And we're going to play something for you. If you're not ready for that sort of thing, don't like that thing, don't like it, please don't listen to it. A professional moralist was driving around with his teenage son in the car. Someone from a thing, I think it was called Morals in Media. If not, it was something very much like that. He heard it, listened to the whole thing. Apparently he and his son were not morally affected by it. In a market in New York, car radios included that probably numbered 25 or 30 million radios. This was the only complaint the FCC received. And for whatever their reasons were, they just sanctioned the state. The Supreme Court voted 5-4 that the FCC had the right to regulate what they termed indecent language. It wasn't obscene, those tests, but it was a kind of a new category of filth. I was sort of proud they had carved out a new category of filth for me, initially for me, called indecent language. You know, the perverse person in me loves the fact that I'm a part of a footnote of American legal history. The only case in the Supreme Court ever based on convenience. And that they had to read these words out loud in court. I'm just proud of that.
The FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, decided all by itself that radio and television were the only 2 parts of American life not protected by the free speech provisions of the First Amendment to the Constitution. I'd like to repeat that because it sounds vaguely important. The FCC, an appointed body, not elected, answerable only to the president, decided on its own that radio and television were the only 2 parts of American life not protected by the First Amendment to the Constitution. Why did they decide that? Because they got a letter from a minister in Mississippi. A Reverend Donald Wildman in Mississippi heard something on the radio that he didn't like. Well, Reverend, did anyone ever tell you there are 2 knobs on the radio? Of course, I'm sure the Reverend isn't that comfortable with anything that has 2 knobs on it. But hey, Reverend, there are 2 knobs on the radio. One of them turns the radio off, and the other one changes the station. Imagine that, Reverend. You can actually change the station. It's called freedom of choice, and it's one of the principles this country was founded upon. Look it up in the library, Reverend, if you have any of them left when you finish burning all the books.
Media operators, people with these radio and television stations, need to please their advertisers. They can't scare them away. They don't want to scare away this audience they're supposed to deliver. So they have to regulate themselves. And that, I don't think this thing, in case, changed very much about what they would have done for themselves, because their self-interest says, we have to watch it. There are people we can lose out there. And cable was what changed everything for me and other people, But I mean, in terms of that, these premium channels that didn't require commercials, therefore had a way to do content that you could see on Broadway, a novel, but that you couldn't hear in a place that was selling biscuits and tires and beer and insurance. I began with HBO in 1977. I think the service itself started in the 70s. And once again, this incredible good luck of mine occurred in that you can't be the hot new guy on the block forever. You're never the fastest guy in eternity. Someone else shows up or the world changes. And so I had my anywhere. And I'm thinking, okay, so where am I going? By this time, disco had shown up, and that's, to me, a symbol of the fact that the revolutionary thing had worn off. That whatever about it was going to stick was in place, and it was going to stick, and now we were off drifting, and that's what I was doing. Creatively was drifting. And cable came along and did something practical for me. It replaced the mass medium of albums for me. It gave me a way to reach large numbers of people with my act.
In Belgiumism. If you've watched the news at all lately, you cannot have
Europe's migrant crisis is getting worse by the day.
Migrant crisis spiraling out.
So I had a way to stay in touch. I kept doing the Tonight Show. I would host it a lot, and I would be a guest and so forth. And I was able to keep touring, and I was able to stay on the road 200, maybe 150 nights a year, and earn money and fill places. And slowly I was just learning how to be a better writer and to produce more material because I had a need. I had to stay out there. And cable gave me a way of keeping interest up on a mass scale and getting my things on the shelf. I like the fact that they recorded their finite. You can look at them on the shelf there for the first 7 or 7 weeks. And at the same time, it helped me mark time and keep exploring and finding a voice. Two things happened around very close to 1980. I developed a relationship with a new manager who had been a promoter of some of my shows, not all of them, in the second half of the 70s, Jerry Hamza, out of Rochester. I got disenchanted, became disenchanted with my current management. And Jerry, I told him I was going to look around for a manager. He lived in Rochester, New York, I'm in Los Angeles, and I didn't think of him for that. And I told him I was going to look for a manager and everything, and he said, well, what about me? I said, well, you know, you're in Rochester and stuff, and I don't know if you want to do that. He said, let me come out to LA and let's talk about this. And Jerry and I then discovered that I had a big IRS debt. I'd done a lot of cocaine in the 70s and had not done responsible things with my own affairs. No one cheated me, but the managers, the money managers, different group, business managers before Jerry, were rolling over my IRS debt, which term still is unusual to me that you could say, oh, sure, I don't know what that means, but anyway, I wasn't paying it. It built up a bit, and then there were things they had disallowed, what we call them exemptions, deductions, based on tax shelters, like my daughter's horses and the place we bought them and put them and everything else stuff. Goofy. And disallowed things, and now there's more money. And penalties and interest that are retroactive to when you made them, not to when they decided to be read. And on top of that, these were pre-Ronald Reagan, in a way, God bless him, I put that in big quotation marks. These are pre-Reagan tax rates. These are 20-cent dollars, 30-cent dollars. This is a dollar where you earn a dollar, they get 70. So I was just going to never catch up. Penalties and interest, penalties and interest, penalties and interest. We located the IRS people, the dealership, let's call it, that was going to function with me in the Rochester office. Instead of LA where they're used to going after celebrities. Rochester folks. Not that Jerry knew them, but a little less awestruck and able to, I don't know, function more like real business people. We started working on this debt, and he would stave off. He would give to the IRS just enough just enough to keep him from the door. Had a lien on my house for 20 years. They never executed it. Jerry kept them at bay with a certain amount of money to pay my just debt. Began to get some traction. In '82, Jerry said, we need a product. We need something I can hold up and show a guy. He put me in Carnegie Hall, and we did the third HBO show in 1982. And then he had something to show. My wife, Brenda, she produced those early shows.
Meriwether guards between you and the bay.
84
The bay is near the main
Jerry
switchboard for the facility and its primary generator.
And
It's where the EMP will do the most
it
damage
began
where
to,
it's least likely
you know, I
to be
began to,
discovered.
the HBO fed the box office fed the HBO numbers. We get in advance on the next HBO show. That would finance us for a while. Not that it was the sole thing, but that would help out with what we were doing. We eventually knocked these taxes lower and lower and lower. I only finished them last year. This is 2003. It was a 22-year, I won't call it a nightmare because I never took it personally. Yeah, I never said, these taxes, the government, they don't want. Pay your taxes, folks. Don't whine, don't complain. It's still the best place to be, even with all the drawbacks. But there it was. I owed the money. I paid it. I didn't want. I wasn't a scofflaw. They never got my house. They never came for it. They never did anything of that type. The lien came off eventually. But the point of the whole story is that I had this reason to stay out on the road. I couldn't entertain this idea. Oh, I'll do a little acting. I'll see if there's any interest over at this studio. And no, right there. Perhaps I'll go down and do a comedy club. And I had that option. I had to work, and I had Jerry was ingenious, and I had enough cachet from these HBO shows and from my history like 10 years earlier that propelled me. We produced enough money to begin to knock this thing down, and then came '84, the show called Carlin on Campus, '86, '88, and now I'm beginning to find my voice.
Did you ever notice when you go to somebody else's house, you never quite feel 100% at home? You know why? No room for your stuff. Somebody else's stuff is all over the place. And what awful stuff it is. Where did they get this stuff? And if you have to stay overnight at someone's house, unexpectedly, and they give you a little room to sleep in that they don't use that often, someone died in it 11 years ago, and they haven't moved any of his stuff. Or wherever they give you to sleep, usually right near the bed, there's a dresser, and there's never any room on the dresser for your stuff. Someone else's shit is on the dresser. Have you noticed that their stuff is shit and your shit is stuff?
I thought to myself, gee, I spent about 40 years with this need to tell people things. And when I did it in the least efficient way, I traveled to where they lived and stood up and said it to them, Now, the first book, Grain Droppings, only had two things in it that had been stand-up material before: stuff and baseball and football. And I put them in because they were semi-signature pieces. People identified me with them. The nice thing about writing from your own ideas, I guess from any ideas, but from your own ideas, from your nuggets, is that in trying to edit them and fix them so they work, new thoughts occur. They grow like the neural networks in the brain do. They find connections that you didn't think of originally, and suddenly a sentence or two is a paragraph. And the paragraph might sit, and as you go and you're way afield somewhere in your files and you find another paragraph, you think, wait a minute, what was that other thing? And zoom, back to that. And that's what's great about this process. And that's what's great about the brain. My acting. Well, to go back to my boyhood dream, because I wanted to be like Danny Kaye. See, I saw Danny Kaye in the Gifted book in a couple of those movies, 47, 48, 49. I was 10, 11, 12. And I thought I could do that. And so that, to me, that was actor. I think of Ray Milland, Gregory Peck. I thought of guy in the movies, movie star, actor. I'll be an actor. Like that. I'll be a comic actor. I didn't know that distinction. Comic actor. I'm going to be an actor. How am I going to do that? Well, I'm funny. I'll be a comedian first. If I'm funny enough, they'll have to let me be a funny actor. First you're funny. How am I going to do that? Well, I love these disc jockeys. I'm really good with my voice.
There's a Meriwether TV inbound. They have no reason to suspect you. Do not engage. Okay, hurry it up. We've just lost connection. They're seeing live images on the security feed.
So I'm thinking, I can be a disc jockey first, and that's safe because you're kind of separated from the audience. You can't see you. That's risk. Then, if I'm good enough at that, they'll have to let me be a comedian because I'll be a funny visitor. And then, if I'm good enough, then I'll be an actor. So I had this path and this dream. I got on television in 65, 66, 67, 68, 69. I'm hot on television, and that's my time. Now, I'm still on autopilot. Autopilot says you're going to be an actor. And that meant now I'm ready to try out for sitcoms and movie parts. I was an actor on That Girl. I was her agent in one episode. I did a movie that same year or pretty close with Doris Day and Brian Keith called With Six You Get Egg Roll. What I found was I wasn't an actor. I didn't have the tools. I had no technique to fall back on. I had no training to fall back on. I had only this idea that this is my birthright. I belong here, I'm an actor. And now I find that, it's not just learning the lines. And by the way, I wasn't even doing true characterizations like actors do. I was doing characters. I found that it's not just these lines. The guy says to you, oh, that was good. Now, let's do that again. I want you, and he says, come down the stairs a little slower while you're saying the line. When you get to the bottom, pause on the second step up. And look over there, the phone is ringing. Notice that, but look over toward the kitchen. You think maybe she's in there. And by the way, cheat your look a little bit to, I can't remember the lines if I'm going to think about all that shit. I'm completely not going to be natural at all, and I wasn't. And I couldn't do it, and I hated it, and it was horrible. It was just like being on the Perry Como special. I was out of place. And I didn't know how to define all that. I couldn't label that at the time for myself. I just felt it was awful. But I knew enough to know that I didn't belong there. And I knew enough to know they're not dumb enough to keep hiring a guy like this. So I slowly just kind of put that to rest. When the 70s happened and the records happened, here's my next burst of heat. Now I can be an actor again if I want. But unfortunately, I have a beard, long hair, and I dress like a hippie. And I am known as a hippie. No one's going to cast me as a library trustee. They're going to cast me as a hippie or an FM DJ or something. So it's all going to be typecasting, and I still couldn't act. So Car Wash came along. I did that because they let me write my own dialogue and create my own scene. It was one day I could get in, get out. They left me alone and have a beer if you're a cab driver. So I did Car Wash. But essentially, the comedy had taken over, and this other stuff was going on. I still like to think about it. I was good in Prince of Tides later on. Because by then I was myself, and I had a little better access to myself, or whatever the heck an actor is supposed to do. And then I did a really good part in a Hallmark miniseries called Streets of Laredo. I was good at that. Because there was something on the page. There was something emotional to do. But I'll never really be an actor. I'll never really be a great writer. I'll be a serviceable writer, get his thoughts across in a nice way, sometimes better than others. And I'll always enjoy 60 or 90 minutes on stage. I'll always be good at that.
In football, the object is for the quarterback, otherwise known as the field general, to be on target with his aerial assault, riddling the defense by hitting his receivers with deadly accuracy, in spite of the blitz, even if he has to use the shotgun. With short bullet passes and long bombs, he marches his troops into enemy territory, balancing this aerial assault with a sustained ground attack which punches holes in the forward wall of the enemy's defensive line. In baseball, the object is to go home and to be safe. I hope I'll be safe at home. Safe at home.
But my dream is this Broadway show. I'm going to do a Broadway show in the fall of 2005. This is a qualitative shift for me. It's not going to be a Broadway show like Robin Williams and Jerry Seinfeld did one night on Broadway, where they sort of kind of used Broadway as a prop to get it in the title. This will be a show that runs, I hope, 6 or 8 months with 2 acts, a single theme.
So we're good to go.
Show called,
I think
Watch
you've done
Your
great.
Language.
And this won't be a problem.
What that means
no
is
one is going to
keep
want to
an eye
admit that
on
anything
your
happened
speech,
here.
your American
According to my
speech.
sources,
Watch was, among them West Side Story. And an intermission, I was 15, 14, 15, 16.
Held a debate about whether creationism is a viable model of origins. I won't go into an analysis, it was far too long, and I've written an overview anyway on the Potholder 54 Facebook page. What I thought worth addressing was Ken Ham's attempt to redefine the word science.
What is science? Well, the origin of the word comes from the classical Latin scientia, which means to know. There's experimental or observational science, as we call it. That's using the scientific method, observation, measurement, experiment, testing.
Oh, that's fine. That's the definition most scientists would generally accept. Science is knowledge, but it's knowledge gained through the scientific method. In short, observation and inference. And the tenets of the scientific method are exactly the same whether you're a geologist, a botanist, or a space physicist. But then Ham tries to overturn the way science has been practiced for hundreds of years in just about every scientific discipline in every country in the world. It's a bit ambitious, but let's see how he goes.
I want this operation over and forgotten about as quickly as possible.
Let me stop you there, Ken. As you call it. So we've established that front that this is a name you come up with. As far as scientists are concerned, all science is observational. So coming up with the name observational science is like coining the term moving NASCAR. So now Ham is going to run you through your specialized equipment for the mission. 1. Night vision goggles.
When you trigger the EMP, the lights go out and you'll need to be able to see. 2. Ray breather. Going out through a cooling tunnel. The ray breather's compact and it'll give you enough oxygen to make the surface. 3. Flare gun. When you make the beach, shoot a flare and the chopper crew will fix your coordinates. 4. Parachute for the drop. 5. Special carbine with suppressor. 6. Pump shotgun with suppressor.
Yes, Ken, because to the public school system and the universities and to scientific institutions worldwide, there's no distinction between what you call observational and experimental science. All science is observational, including those disciplines historically. We can't observe the Earth orbiting the Sun, but we can infer it from observations of the retrograde motion of Mars and the phases of Venus. We can't observe the structure of the atom, or what causes an earthquake, but we can infer these things through other observations. No scientific theory, from heliocentric theory, atomic theory, and platonic theory, has ever been observed. It's inferred from observations. So, paleontology, the scientific discipline that charts evolution over hundreds of millions of years, is based on observation and inference, just like every other science. Paleontologists weren't there 68 million years ago to observe this Triceratops, but we can observe its fossil remains, and we can observe footprints of fossilized species of dinosaurs like this to know how they lived, what they ate, and from the ground they walked on, what sort of environment they inhabited. Paleontologists also observe very carefully the changes in morphology of fossil organisms moving up through geological layers of rock in which the organisms were buried. And whether the layers are thousands or millions of years old, either way, paleontologists can make the obvious inference that the organism is changing over time. But according to the historical science argument, paleontologists can't use the evidence they observe to make these inferences because the hidden evidence is there. And then someone came forward in the debate to refute all that. Ken Ham's argument was brilliantly and successfully demolished by Ken Ham.
We can say, as creationists, we have many creation scientists and researchers, and lots of reasons I would say the kind of process one really is more at the family level of classification. For instance, there's one dog, there's one cat, one, even though you're different gender species. You see, based on creationists have drawn up what they believe is a creation fortune. In other words, they say, look, there's great variation in the genetics of dogs and finches and so on. And so over time, particularly after Noah's flood, you'd expect that for two dogs, for instance, you could end up with different species of dogs because there's variability in the genes of the creature.
So what's Ken Ham just done? He's used observations of animals today, the observation that there's a wide variety of them, the observation that similar animal species are morphologically similar, the observation that each offspring has a different genetic makeup from its parents. He's used all these observations to make an inference about what happened in the past. He's even got drawings of a triceratops, because he accepts they once roamed the earth along with other dinosaurs, and he only reached that conclusion based on observations of fossilized bones.
Gets first choice
No,
on
he didn't
position.
get it.
Side-facing
The
minigun
Bible,
placements
the
are in the
idea
rear.
that
High caliber explosive rounds in the co-pilot's seat. Keep in mind there's a longer fire return interval on that one. Round 2. You take the last 2 positions in the bird and you get ready to jump.
Observation. And he certainly didn't get his detailed understanding of the Triceratops from the Bible, he got it from the fossil record. The only part of this book that Getham got from the Bible was his starting point, the blind belief that 2 of each kind of animal emerged from the past 4,000 years ago. So since Ham accepts that observations can indeed tell us what happened in the past, then observations from the fossil record showing no such non-appearance animal families override that blind belief. That's why creationism, a viable model, Ken, because of admit it's based on belief. You yourself said science has to be based on observation.
First topic is global warming and why it's not here. The ice caps in Greenland are actually getting thinner. Just like Y2K was not real, but everybody thought we were going to die. 7th grade physics shows that CO2's molecule is less than your weight and makes it very heavy. It can't rise high enough to cause the greenhouse effect.
Okay, so a 14-year-old kid has outwitted all those thousands of scientists who don't realise that CO2 is a heavy gas and would therefore stay at the bottom of the atmosphere and asphyxiate us all. Well done. Now on to debunked evolution. So in this video I'm going to show you how to take on these conspiracy theorists, creationists and internet junkies and have fun in the process. I'm not saying my method is foolproof or that I have all the answers, but if you like these ideas, give them a go. It's certainly less painful than chewing on your own leg.
Okay, now fly out to the lab, gaining altitude. You'll need to be high for the ground team to hit their drop zone and for your bird's electrics to be clear of the EMP.
Your atmosphere like an arsehole. Come on, generating into a much higher watt you want.
When you're above the lab, we trigger the pulse. Power down there goes out, and the ground team can jump. Chopper team will hold position above the lab, trying to stop the ground team getting swamped inside.
They're actually very nice people who have 3 things in common. They tend to believe whenever they read or misread or outside blogs, they can never ever admit that they got something wrong, and they all think they know better than the experts. Case in point, I'm not disputing that increasing CO2 will cause warming, but it all depends on how much. From my own investigation into the subject as a citizen scientist, I think, thanks Jim, sir, what a wonderful word to describe citizens who learn their science from the internet, citizen scientists. The term is usually applied to ordinary people who help researchers when a huge amount of data is needed. They don't necessarily have actual science education, and they certainly couldn't presume to know more than the experts. What Chipstone means by a citizen scientist, and the definition I'm happy to go with, is someone who doesn't necessarily have much of a science education, but who does presume to know more than the experts. And based on what he's read on the internet and in the Daily Mail and figured out for himself, the citizen scientist is clear to drop. Go, go, go! Are wrong. Which means he believes that either the experts are competent or they're all dishonest and have delivered the figures. Citizen scientists never ever consider a third possibility that maybe the experts know something they don't. The second rule is, well, let's see if you can.
There's been an effort within the scientific community to censor out information against evolution.
So what do you do? Tell her, no, that happened.
Okay, ground team, let's go.
close the doors and get into the lab. Strangled her with a scarf knitted out of her own
What we need is being stored in a research station in the center of the facility. Move quickly, get through the lab, and get us that data.
The video, doesn't it? But entering into an argument with the creationist conspiracy theorist just gets your blood pressure up and gets your mind. Getting this woman to answer a question like what information has been censored out will not only stump her and highlight her ignorance.
Looks like some systems are running on an emergency generator. As long as the main switch is off, that won't cause us problems.
Holy crap!
Keep moving and be ready for resistance. You're no good to us dead. Not quite yet.
Next to the sun.
What worries your adversary isn't someone who simply shouts opinions, but someone who asks penetrating questions and won't fall for evasive answers.
I was entitled to express my views. I was entitled to be consulted.
Did you threaten to overrule
I
him?
was not entitled to instruct Derek Lewis, and I did not instruct him. And
Did
the
you
truth
threaten
of
to overrule him?
the truth of the matter is that Mr.
Gravitating toward the shanty Irish, you have breeding, she would say to me. You have refinement. And at these intermissions, she would see someone and she would say, look at that man over there. Look at the way he's holding his glass. Look at the way he moves his hand when he speaks. Watch how he holds that cigarette. He's cultured. He has refinement.
She's all yours.
You have that. So, that, I'm gonna get a chance to realize that for her in a way. Because when you throw out someone's influence, in that case, you know, trying to separate from a parent of the opposite sex, differentiation, they call it, you necessarily throw out the whole package. And I had to turn my back on it as well as what I
Was that CO2 is molecules in the left they needed an animal that there are not very many of, so that we will believe that is the reason that there are not as many of them, and there's so many more of us. They never think of giraffes and elephants to being compared to us.
I don't know, something about giraffes and elephants. Yes, it can be so frustrating arguing with people with the mentality of 14-year-olds you want to chew your own leg off. So in this video I'm going to show you how to take on these conspiracy theorists, creationists and internet junkies and have fun in the process. I'm not saying my method is foolproof or that I have all the answers, but if you like these ideas, give them a go. It's certainly less painful than chewing off your leg. Dumb shit, uneducated buffoon, dumb, blind, arrogant, ex-hippie arsehole. Boys! The first rule in arguing with arseholes is don't treat your adversary like an arsehole. Come on, degenerating into a mud fight is what he wants, because it leads away from your strongest suit, which, if you're fighting on the side of science, is measurable, observable, documented evidence. In many cases, these guys are not arseholes anyway. They're actually very nice people who have three things in common. They tend to believe whatever they read or misread on anti-science blogs. They can never, ever admit that they got something wrong, and they all think they know better than the experts. Case in point, I'm not disputing that increasing CO2 will cause warming, but it all depends on how much. For my own investigation as a citizen scientist, I think the warming... Thanks, Chipser. What a wonderful word to describe citizens who learn their science from the internet. Citizen scientists. The term is usually applied to ordinary people who help researchers when a huge amount of data is needed. They don't necessarily have much of a science education, and they certainly wouldn't presume to know more than the experts. What Chipster means by a citizen scientist, and the definition I'm happy to go with, is someone who doesn't necessarily have much of a science education, but who does presume to know more than the experts. And based on what he's read on the internet and in the Daily Mail and figured out for himself, the citizens artist is even bold enough to tell us that the experts are wrong. Which means he believes that either the experts are all incompetent, or they're all dishonest and have deliberately fiddled the figures. Citizen scientists never ever consider a third possibility that maybe the experts know something they don't. The second rule is, well, let's see if you can guess.
There's been an effort within the scientific community to censor out information against evolution.
So what do? Tell her that hasn't, that's simply not true. Get into an insulting slanging match and strangle her with a scarf knitted out of her own self-righteousness. Or 3, be polite and ask her what information has been censored out. I go for the third option. So if my first rule is arguing with an arsehole is not to treat an arsehole, the second rule is argue. I know, that rather negates the title of the video, doesn't it? But entering into an argument with a creationist or a conspiracy theorist just gets your blood pressure up and sheds more human light. Getting this woman to answer a question like what information has been censored out will not only stump her and highlight her complete ignorance, it'll force the woman to think. Yes.
You should be coming up on the research station.
Well, it's a bit like a magnet. If you have a small magnet and a big magnet, the big magnet's the one that's going to pull the little magnet around and not the little that's going to pull the big one. So if you compare the Earth next to the Sun, which one's going to make the other one spin around?
Yeah, the sun will make the Earth spin around, yeah.
Dissecting claims with a scalpel certainly gives you a tool in bludgeoning them with a hammer, like this.
You know what your problem is, Current? You're an elitist. No, you think you're above the American people.
What worries your adversary isn't someone who simply shouts opinions, but someone who asks penetrating questions and won't fall for evasive answers.
I was entitled to express my views. I was entitled to be consulted.
Did you threaten to overrule?
I was not entitled to instruct Derek Lewis, and I did not instruct him. And
Did you threaten to overrule him?
The truth of the matter is that Mr. Marriott was not suspended.
Did you threaten to overrule him?
I did not overrule Derek Lewis.
Did you threaten to overrule him?
I took advice on what I could or could not do.
Did you threaten to overrule him, Mr. Howard?
Scrupulously in accordance with that advice. I did not overrule Derek Lewis. Mr. Marriott was not suspended.
Did you threaten to overrule him?
I have accounted for my decision to dismiss Derek Lewis.
Did you threaten to overrule him?
Detail before the House of Commons.
I note you're not answering the question whether you threatened to overrule him.
The important aspect, which is very clear to bear in mind.
Sorry, I've been invited to you.
If you can straight yes or no, and I will give you an answer.
Did you threaten to overrule him?
I discussed this matter with Derek.
Yeah, that's what worries them. Single-minded, unflinching pursuit of an answer. Finding that killer question isn't hard because whereas the hallmark of science is consistency, the hallmark of junk science is inconsistency.
Why did these opinions evolve, losing their life? In the end, the answer is irrelevant because evolution will simply make it fit. Answers or not, because evolution conforms to whatever evidence it is presented with, because it is not science.
What? Ian, that's the very point of science. It's meant to fit the evidence. In other words, evidence comes first, then the conclusion. In junk science, it's the conclusion that comes first. Now, I should point out that in science, we talk about the overwhelming preponderance of evidence, because in every field of science, there are always going to be a few anomalies, and that's why scientists do research. But the overwhelming preponderance of evidence has to be consistent with the theory. In citizen scientists' world, if the overwhelming preponderance of evidence is inconsistent, then the citizen scientist will either change it, as we've seen many times, or simply ignore it. All you have to do is ask questions to find out where the claims of the citizen scientist and the evidence don't match. When it finally dawns on him that things don't add up, he'll go through contortions to try to avoid answering the question. Here's an example from one of my video fora. Someone called the Clunking Fist accepts that an increase in CO2 causes the Earth to warm up, and that it's done that in the past. But he claims these high-temperature conditions never stayed around. That's contradicted by the fact that these high-temperature conditions lasted millions of years. So the obvious killer question is, how long did these hothouse conditions last? If Clunking Fist admits they lasted millions of years, he's contradicting his own hypothesis. So rather than admit he's wrong, he has to avoid answering the question. In all, I had to ask 6 times, but of course I never got an answer, just an interesting mix of evasive responses. Now, it's not a difficult question, and the answer is pretty straightforward. When someone goes to such lengths to avoid answering a question, you can be pretty sure he knows he's been caught out. In that case, you may wonder, why don't these guys simply give an honest answer and abandon a claim that's so obviously inconsistent with the facts? Why go through the painful process of having to avoid a question again and again, when all you have to do is say, whoops, my mistake? I know, weird, isn't it? If a competent scientist discovers he got something wrong, he'll simply acknowledge the error. If that changes the hypothesis, then, as Ian Juby pointed out, the hypothesis changes. But remember, in citizen scientist world, the conclusion comes first, so the conclusion can never ever be wrong. Refusing to answer 6 times is nothing. The record so far is held by someone called Kearbird, after he claimed my climate change videos had ignored scientists with the strongest evidence against what he called large-scale APW. It took me 15 attempts to try to get the names of the scientists I'd supposedly ignored so that I could check out this strongest evidence. The excuse is not revealing it, but even fascinating. Google it. I've already named. I refuse to engage in a link for it. Besides, you don't get to dictate the rules of our chat. This is not my central point. You already know their names. I won't give you the names because you'll attack their credibility. I may have posted the names elsewhere on another thread. I think you can answer the question. You know the names. Now, if I had the strongest evidence for something, I'd only need to be asked once, and I wouldn't hesitate to say what it was. Of course, watching citizen scientists squirm like this does make it far more fun than shouting strangers. But there's also a serious side to this. The brain knows it's wrong, but the other part still clings to a belief that it's right. It's fascinating to see the variety of excuses that are served up to keep the two halves of the brain colliding. And there's a telemetry to answer the questions as well. My experience is that scientists often try to keep their statements vague and ambiguous, so they can change their claim when they get caught out. In fact, watch for the sudden change of claim as your question. So ask questions to establish their position very clearly at the time. It helps that they're ignorant. Remember, these guys think they're very better than the expert, so never make out to be smarter than them. And only in my position. Even Volvo, even smarter mechanically, this guy.
And you said that your nephew was planning on coming to your party? Yes, sir. And he called you saying he wanted to. Yes, sir. And that was for sure, you were there. Have you told your nephew that?
Say what? People trying to hide something are much less on guard when they think they're dealing with an idiot. Play dumb, be respectful, and they'll only be too happy to try to teach you their pet theories in detail, assume to know more than the experts. What Chipster means by a citizen scientist, and the definition I'm happy to go with, is someone who doesn't necessarily have much of a science education, but who does presume to know more than the experts. And based on what he's read on the internet and in the Daily Mail and figured out for himself, the citizen scientist is even bold enough to tell us that the experts are wrong. Which means he believes that either the experts are all incompetent, or they're all dishonest and they're deliberately fiddle the figures. Citizen scientists never ever consider a third possibility, that maybe the experts know something
When I ran
they
agents
don't.
in the field, I had to entrap them.
The second
cajole
rule
them,
is,
threaten
well,
them with
let's see if
deportation.
you
You're
can
never
guess.
going to know what I
There's been an effort within the
Now,
scientific
apparently,
community
all you
to
gotta do is
censor
give
out
them a couple bucks and a
information
few kind words.
against evolution.
So what do you do? Tell her, no, there hasn't, that's simply not true. Get into an insulting slanging match and strangle her with a scarf knitted out of her own self-righteousness. Or 3, be polite and ask her what information.
That's the problem. You don't let me finish.
What worries your adversary isn't someone who simply shouts opinions, but someone who asks penetrating questions and won't fall for evasive answers.
I was entitled to express my views. I was entitled to be consulted.
Did you threaten to overrule
I
him?
was not entitled to instruct Derek Lewis, and I did not instruct him. And
Did
the
you
truth
threaten
of
to overrule
the truth of the matter is that Mr. Marriott was not suspended.
Did you
I did
threaten
not
to overrule him?
I did not overrule Derek
Did you
Lewis.
threaten to overrule him?
I took advice on what I could or could not
Did
do,
you threaten
and
to
I
overrule
acted
him?
You look like you
scrupulously in
want a
accordance
private
with that
dance.
advice. I did not overrule Derek
Did you
Lewis.
threaten to overrule
Mr.
him?
Marriott was not suspended.
Did you threaten to overrule him?
I have accounted for my decision to dismiss Derek Lewis
Did you
in
threaten to
great
overrule him?
detail before the House of Commons.
I note you're not answering the question whether you threatened
Well,
to overrule him.
The important aspect of this, which is very clear to bear in mind,
I'm sorry, I'm going to be
is
frightfully
this.
rude, but,
Yes, you
but
can-
I'm sorry. It's a
You
quite
can put-
straight
you can
yes
put
or
the
no.
question and I
It's a
would
straight
give
yes or
you-
no
I would
answer.
give you an
Did you
answer.
threaten to overrule him?
I discussed this matter with Derek Lewis.
Yeah, that's what worries them. Single-minded, unflinching pursuit of an answer. Finding that killer question isn't hard because whereas the hallmark of science is consistency, the hallmark of junk science is inconsistency.
Why did these amphibians de-evolve, losing their legs? In the end, the answer is irrelevant because evolution will simply make it fit. Answers or not, because evolution conforms to whatever evidence it is presented with, because it is not science.
What? Ian, that's the very point of science. It's meant to fit the evidence. In other words, evidence comes first, then the conclusion. In junk science, it's the conclusion that comes first. Now, I should point out that in science, we talk about the overwhelming preponderance of evidence, because in every field of science, there are always going to be anomalies, and that's why scientists do research. But the overwhelming preponderance of evidence has to be consistent with the theory. In citizen scientists' world, if the overwhelming preponderance of evidence is inconsistent, then the citizen scientist will either change it, as we've seen many times, or simply ignore it. All you have to do is ask questions to find out where the claims of the citizen scientist and the evidence don't match. When it finally dawns on him that things don't add up, he'll go through contortions to try to avoid answering the question. Here's an example from one of my video fora. Someone called the clunking fist accepts that an increase in CO2 causes the Earth to warm up, and that it's done that in the past. But he claims these high temperature conditions never stayed around. That's contradicted by the fact that these high temperature conditions lasted millions of years. So the obvious killer question is, how long did these hothouse conditions last? If Clunking Fist admits they lasted millions of years, he's contradicting his own hypothesis. So while he can admit he's wrong, he has to avoid answering the question. In all, I had to ask 6 times, but of course I never got an answer, just an interesting mix of evasive responses. Now, it's not a difficult question, and the answer is pretty straightforward. When someone goes to such lengths to avoid answering a question, you can be pretty sure he knows he can figure it out. In that case, you may wonder, why don't these guys simply give an honest answer and abandon a claim that's so obviously inconsistent with the facts? Why go through the painful process of having to avoid a question again and again, when all you have to do is say, oops, my mistake. I know, weird, isn't it? If a competent scientist discovers he got something wrong, he'll simply acknowledge the error. If that changes the hypothesis,